Chapter 351. In the darkness, there was a little light. The light was erratic, and his consciousness was hazy. Wang Lu shook his head hard, but he couldn't become more awake. He was still drowsy. The surrounding was empty, and the distant light was erratic. "Are you interested in making a deal?" In the darkness, a familiar voice lingered in his ears. "Heh." Wang Lu coldly sneered, refused without hesitation, and then closed his eyes again. However, the voice in his ears didn't give up. "If you refuse this opportunity because of a moment of dislike, you are likely to regret it. For example, don't you want to know what will happen to Luli after her spirit is occupied?" Wang Lu said, "I'm not interested to know. In any case, even if I know, I can't cure it. Sooner or later, I will take her back to the mountain and hand her over to the elders to be dealt with. If they can deal with it, then deal with it. If they can't, at worst, she will become a vegetable. I will remember to water and fertilize her every day." "Heh, it sounds like you're really not worried at all. However, from another perspective, don't you want to know the secret of spirit occupation?" "No." "Really? You got the support of Golden King in the championship trial, and all the way, you were like a hot knife through butter. Those several idiots were obviously 100 times stronger than you, but they were played by you. The only obstacle you encountered was me, and the only thing I can threaten you with is spirit occupation. When I was seriously injured and dying, I could invade the genius cultivators of your 9 regions with spirit occupation. Are you really not interested in this skill?" Wang Lu sneered, but when the words were about to come out of his mouth, they suddenly changed. "Of course I'm interested. Well, although you really don't want to hear too much from me, deep in your heart, you must be interested in spirit occupation. For you, curiosity is a trait that will never be lacking." Wang Lu frowned and thought about another problem. "Here, you can't lie." "Yes, in this world, no one can lie, so you don't have to bother to deal with me with words, and you don't have to worry that I will lie to you. I can talk to you like this because of the blessing of this world. At present, I'm being suppressed by you very well, so you can rest assured. You're trying to sell me mind occupation. Are you trying to survive? I'm not that naive. If I fall into your hands, of course it'll be a fate worse than death. I'm looking forward to what kind of torture you'll bring me. So the deal I'm talking about isn't about buying my own life. Then what do you want? I hope you can stop your cooperation with Golden King, not only for me, but also for yourself." Faceless One's statement immediately aroused Wang Lu's interest. "You want me to give up the king's treasure house? On the contrary, I hope that you can keep the treasury in your hands and not hand it over to others." Faceless One said, "I can guess the tacit understanding between you and Golden King. He helped you defeat Holy Light Religion, and you helped him recapture the treasure house. The method used was nothing more than to give up the administrator authority after winning it, so that the authority would return to the hands of Golden King. You are not a native of this continent, so there is no real meaning in occupying the treasure house. It is better to sell it to Golden King as a favor. This way, maybe he can help you find what you want." "And then?" Faceless One said, "I admit that your method can achieve your goal, but it's also the same if you change it. If you continue to go on and become the administrator with the highest authority, there will be no secret in this treasure house for you. And if you seek refuge with Golden King, the consequences may not be what you want. Golden King regaining control of the treasure house means that he has his own foundation in his remnant soul state. Given time, resurrection may not be impossible. And a resurrected Golden King may not matter to you in the Far East, but what about your friend? Although the Night King's territory is not in the center of the continent, with Golden King's way of ruling, sooner or later, you will face his threat. What do you think will happen to the Night King's character? Of course, the jade will be broken and the tile will be intact. When has Aya ever taken the initiative to admit defeat in her life? However, that day will never come." Wang Lu smiled and wanted to speak, but then he remembered the rules here, so he remained silent. "You can't lie, but I can't say it. Moreover, for Golden King, the experience of his remnant soul state is not enough for outsiders to know. No matter how great your contribution is, just by witnessing his ugliness with your own eyes, you have already committed the original sin. On the other hand, you have made great contributions to Golden King, but what can you get? A gratitude that can't possibly be sincere, and a mere treasure. Don't you think it's ridiculous? Wang Lu lightly said, "It's not ridiculous, at least not more ridiculous than your trivial spirit occupation." Faceless One said, "Spirit occupation is just an appetizer, I can give you far more than that." Wang Lu said with a smile, "Based on the fact that you, a prisoner who can neither live nor die, can't?" Faceless One said, "Based on the fact that I am the founder of the Priory of Zion." What? Wang Lu was shocked. He thought that the defeat of Faceless One was already in the past, but unexpectedly, he could still play tricks. The founder of the Priory of Zion? Wasn't that one of the mortal enemies of Holy Light religion, the biggest opposition force hidden within the church, with a history of thousands of years? Faceless One was the church's knife that was deeply trusted by the Pope. Moreover, his debut was no more than 100 years ago, so he couldn't match the identity of the founder. Is it hard to understand? Faceless One said, "Faceless One has indeed appeared in front of the world for only 100 years, but before Faceless One, there are too many identities. I can't even remember how many times I have reincarnated. Secondly, if I hadn't become a mad dog of the church and gained the deep trust of the Pope, do you think the Priory of Zion could survive under the suppression of Holy Light religion for thousands of years? Well, in that case, it does seem to make some sense. In other words, the so-called biggest opposition force of Holy Light religion is just their own dog." Faceless One said, "Any large organization will have its own opposition voice. Even if everyone's belief is the same, people's hearts are still different. An internal division is often a precursor to the collapse of an organization. Those so-called organizations that are destroyed by geniuses are more often destroyed by themselves. Holy Light religion used the Priory of Zion to gather the opposition, sometimes suppressing, sometimes supporting, playing in the palm of their hands. Thus, Holy Light religion can stand tall for thousands of years." Good method. Wang Lu sincerely praised. Faceless One said, "However, the Priory of Zion, as an opposition force that has lasted for thousands of years, is not just pretending to resist the church. All along, we have been waiting for a suitable opportunity to oust the current power holder and replace him. And now, this opportunity has finally come. 80 years ago, Holy Light religion left its birthplace and moved the holy city to the king's treasure house. This is a very bold gamble. However, because of you, the church's foundation in the king's treasure house has been greatly shaken. Once the administrator's authority is taken away, the 100-year plan would go down the drain. At the same time, the church's strategic layout in the eastern region has also been disintegrated by the eastern cultivators. Instead of falling apart, the eastern city-states have become more closely united, and even allied with the intellectual city to oppose Holy Light religion. This can be said to be the most serious moment since the establishment of the church. There have been similar situations in the past, but at that time, when the foreign enemy came, Holy Light religion was unprecedentedly united. However, now, as long as you are willing to complete the deal with me, I can let the Priory of Zion be your help to overthrow the foundation of Holy Light religion's rule in the continent. Mobilize the Priory of Zion? How? Wang Lu asked, or do you think I will let you go? Faceless One said, "I'm not that naive, and my deal with you is not for my survival. The special structure of the Priory of Zion makes it unnecessary for me, the founder, to come forward. The one who will come forward to lead the organization is another person." Another person? Joan of Arc, you should have heard of her. Because when Rowan saw the Night King herself, he should have lamented her similarity to the Holy Woman. Wang Lu was even more surprised. What's the relationship between Joan of Arc and the Priory of Zion? Moreover, isn't she dead? She has never lived. Joan of Arc is just a fictional character. Her real identity is the body of the Night King. What? That's not strange, is it? The reason why the Night King's rule in Bretonnia fell apart, in addition to her own problem, the church's infiltration work has been indispensable. After the Night King's death, the church soon invaded Bretonnia, and I accidentally found her body. As a king whose realm was close to legendary, and whose real strength was more than the average legendary, her body did not collapse. Therefore, I sealed it up. Later, the riot caused by Joan of Arc was actually directed by a few high-level members of the Priory of Zion, including me. At that time, the claimed purpose was to expose the decadence of Holy Light religion, to attract more talents to join the Priory, and to enhance the cohesion of the Priory. But in fact, it was just to bring down the two holy ones of the Church, the ones who, according to the rumor, made the decision to kill her. They used to be strong competitors for the Pope. However, after Joan of Arc's canonization, although they were not pursued, their prestige was greatly reduced, and there was no possibility for them to go further. Wang Lu asked, what happened to the Night King's body later? It was claimed that she was defeated and executed by the Holy One, but in fact, she was strictly sealed by the Church and guarded by the members of the Priory of Zion. Faceless One said, however, as long as they receive the correct password, the body will be unsealed and the Holy Woman will come back to life. The original intention of this move was to resurrect the Saintess when the prestige of the current Pope was damaged due to an accident. This was a method to strengthen the Pope's prestige in all aspects. Now, it can be used by you. If I'm not mistaken, the real Night King is now in the state of spirit of the brave departed, right? If she can find her own body and unite her spirit and body, it is very likely that she would be able to cross the legendary boundary that she could never cross in the past. And once the Night King becomes a legend, her strength will have a tremendous change. Perhaps, she would be able to stand side by side with the Pope and other top powerhouses in the continent. At the same time, she will get the full support of the Priory of Zion. Thousands of Holy Light believers and thousands of years of accumulated resources will be used by her. Her rule will be far above that of a mere Bretonnia. Sounds good. Faceless One earnestly said, with the deep-rooted Holy Light religion in the Western continent, no matter how the crisis evolves, it is impossible to completely eradicate it. Even if the Holy Light religion retreats to the Western wilderness, its influence will remain in the original ruling area for a long time, which requires a new force to take over. And the Priory of Zion under the leadership of the Night King is the best choice. Wang Lu pondered for a moment. In other words, support a puppet regime? That sounds good, but I'm curious. You're busy, but you can't exchange your life for it, so what's in it for you? I've never cared about my own life and death. Compared to the average person, I've lived for too long. Faceless One earnestly said, it's true that no matter how much I do, I can't live. However, the faith in Holy Light can flourish forever. Is this what you call flourish forever? Wang Lu sneered. The ruling layer has been replaced and reduced to a puppet, is this what you call flourish forever? Although Holy Light religion has suffered a blow, the faith in Holy Light can indeed continue to be passed on. Faceless One earnestly said, and for me, nothing is more important than this. Nothing is more important than this. Wang Lu gently nodded, as if deeply touched by Faceless One's awareness. In that case, I choose to refuse. Chapter 352. Refuse? Faceless One was somewhat surprised by Wang Lu's refusal. What's the reason? Because I don't like you, so anything that's good for you, I will deal with it in reverse. That's it? Faceless One said, I didn't expect you to be so naive. Because of your momentary liking and disliking, you can even ignore the overall situation? Wang Lu sneered. Pfft, overall situation? Who do you think I am? You actually want to tempt me with benefits? Why do you talk about liking and disliking me? Listen clearly, my momentary liking and disliking are far more important than your so-called overall situation. I am a cultivator of 9 regions, not your Western continent profession. For me, understanding is far more important than worldly power and wealth. If you want to talk about benefits with me, you're looking for the wrong person. That's ridiculous. Faceless One angrily said. You, Wang Lu directly interrupted him. Enough, no need to say anything. Just wait for Golden King to resurrect, and then your holy light religion and holy light faith will be completely eradicated. To be honest, just hating holy light religion is enough for me to stand on the side of Golden King. After a long silence, Faceless One laughed wildly. Ha 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 ha. You will regret it. You don't know what you've done. What will you lose? Ha ha ha, since I don't know, why should I regret it? Let's talk about it when I know. Besides, let me borrow a saying from the ancient people, it's all very, very good, but I don't like it. As soon as his voice fell, the boundless darkness suddenly opened up, and a dazzling light lit up in front of him. The haze dispersed, and Faceless One's voice suddenly disappeared. In his line of sight, the towering beautiful unique pool peak was already in front of him. And beside him, Lu Li, Bai Shixian, and Quan Zouhua, were still unconscious. Only their gentle breathing proved that they were in good condition. The only one who was a bit embarrassed was Aya. Because she didn't have time to fasten her seatbelt, she fell and curled up on his leg. The place where he talked to Faceless One should be an independent space isolated by some spell. There, the challengers would undergo a very strict test. It was so strict that many ancient sages and mighty figures were helpless. They had no choice but to resort to trickery and use the inertia of the war chariot to break through the trial area. So, now, did Golden King's chariot, driven by inertia, carry them through the trial area? Or could it be that I completed the trial before the chariot broke through? Wang Lu curiously thought about it. In theory, since the others were still asleep and he was the only one awake, it should be the latter. However, he really didn't think that he deliberately did anything during the conversation with Faceless One. If it was a test, what was the test? But soon, his attention was attracted by the approaching beautiful unique pool peak. The towering mountain was like a majestic giant, bringing with it a suffocating pressure. Only by approaching it could one understand that the significance of this mountain was far more than just the end of the trial. He freed himself from the safety belt and reached out to control the chariot. He quickly climbed up the mountain, but the road was long. After an unknown amount of time, Wang Lu finally reached the peak. There, an unexpected person was waiting for him. The man stood on the top of the mountain, with his back against the golden sun above the sea of clouds, shining with golden light. However, when he got closer, he found that the dazzling golden light did not come from the distant sun, but from him. Under that unparalleled brilliance, even the sunlight was overshadowed. Golden King? Wang Lu was stunned as he got out of the chariot. Although he was stunned, he felt that it was not incomprehensible. Humph, in view of your achievements, I grant you the qualification to call me by my name and talk to me. Golden King raised his head high and gently cast his eyes down. Feel honored. You are the only mortal who has received this gift in tens of thousands of years. Wang Lu faintly smiled and nodded. Then, Golden King slightly lowered his head, and his eyes revealed considerable appreciation. You are the only one who has reached the top of the mountain in tens of thousands of years, except for me. Wang Lu was a bit surprised. Only 2 people? Then before Holy Light Religion. At the mention of Holy Light Religion, Golden King's face became very gloomy. A group of lowly bastards, do you think they deserve to touch beautiful unique pool peak? Wang Lu pondered and asked, in other words, they haven't really completed the 5th trial of the champion's trial? They have. Golden King said, the content of the champion's trial only stops at the foot of beautiful unique pool peak. As long as they can break through the sea of clouds and break through the last obstacle of the sea of clouds, they will pass. I will not set a test that is beyond the upper limit of the ability of my subordinates, but at the same time, I will not let filthy lowly people defile my beautiful unique pool peak. Wang Lu pondered and said, so, it's impossible to climb beautiful unique pool peak in an ordinary way. Like I said, it's strange to use the chariot to break through the last obstacle of the sea of clouds, and it should not be the right way. But if there is no chariot, we can't even leave the castle. Could it be that there is a problem with the rule that only by using the chariot to reach the finish line? That is not a natural rule of this place, but a group of lowly and ignorant bastards who think themselves clever. Golden King's tone was arrogant, belittling those who built the castle as worthless. However, when he turned around, he seriously explained to Wang Lu, beautiful unique pool peak is a trial left by the ancient gods to the human world. It is the starting point for the human world to reach the heaven. The sea of clouds at the foot of the mountain is the first test to screen the mortals. In the sea of clouds, there are all kinds of trials in the human world, which requires the trial taker to have excellent courage, wisdom, and perseverance. However, what really determines whether a person can break away from the mortal world and ascend to the heaven is the last obstacle in the sea of clouds. I have kept the first half of it as my champion's trial, because those who can pass the first half must be the most outstanding warriors in the world, and only the most outstanding warriors in the world are worthy of being the champion under my command. As for the last half, there is no need for them to try it. Wang Lu asked, "What is the content of the last obstacle?" "I was pulled into a strange space and made a deal with someone, but it didn't come to an agreement." "That is the content of your trial." Golden King said, "There, you will get an irresistible opportunity to make a deal. As long as you suffer a little bit, you can get endless benefits, power, wealth, or beauty. And this deal is not an illusory illusion, it can really be realized." Wang Lu nodded slightly, expressing his approval. Just now, in the illusion, the conditions put forward by Faceless One didn't seem to be a lie. If he was willing to make a deal with him, the benefits that he could get were immeasurable. Even if Holy Light religion was severed, it was still a powerful first-rate organization in the Western continent. If placed in 9 regions, it was equivalent to Wang Lu having a high-rank immortal cultivation sect under his command. What Wang Lu needed to do was to pinch his nose and shake hands with Faceless One. After that, he would kill and bury those who should be killed and those who should be buried. There would be no impact, just pinching his nose. However, Wang Lu didn't like it, so he refused. Moreover, it was a sincere refusal. Could it be that not knowing good from bad, disregarding gains and losses is the secret to pass the test? Wang Lu couldn't help but laugh. Golden King solemnly said, "Not wronging one's mind with the change of external things is the first step for a mortal to become a god." Wang Lu curiously said, "If that's the case, that kind of brainlessness and unhappiness are not uncommon in the world. So, why are there only 2 people who can pass the final test and come to beautiful unique Pool Peak?" Golden King said, "Can brainlessness and unhappiness pass the previous test of the Sea of Clouds? To be able to come here, one must be good at weighing the pros and cons, have a deep mind, and be resourceful." Upon hearing this, Wang Lu couldn't help but interrupt, "I think none of the people in my car can realize these conditions that you said." Surprisingly, Golden King didn't care about Wang Lu's rudeness, but contemptuously said, "That's why they can't even open their eyes here, they are not qualified to witness this great mountain. They joined the test as your subordinates, even if they follow you to the end, they can only serve as a foil. So that's how it is." Golden King returned to the topic and said, "Only those who are resourceful and good at weighing the pros and cons can go to the end. However, the more intelligent and thoughtful the mortal bastards are, the more they can't resist the temptation of the last test. Therefore, I did not expect that you would actually be able to make it here." Wang Lu faintly smiled and said, "More or less, I have some luck." Golden King said, "Then, let me ask you a question. If you have a very important and close person who died, and the one who mastered the method of resurrection was a treacherous villain that you have always disdained to pay attention to, would you trade with him in exchange for the resurrection of your close person?" Wang Lu pondered for a long time and then said, "From my point of view, I don't like to do things by wronging my mind. If the one who mastered the method of resurrection is a treacherous villain, then he can master it, so I should be able to as well. I don't need to trade with him, I just need to find another way. However, I can't guarantee that if I encounter a similar situation, I can refuse every time. After all, there are too many things in the world that make people helpless." Golden King nodded, and his eyes showed more approval. Yes, having the mind alone can't prove anything, but when you can stand at the peak of the mortal world, there will not be many situations that make you helpless. And at that time, whether you have the mind or not, will be the biggest dividing line between mortals and gods. After I conquered beautiful unique Pool Peak and the sea of clouds at the foot of the mountain, I put it in my treasure house as a part of my champion's trial. During this period, I simplified many of the tests in the sea of clouds. But even so, for tens of thousands of years, you are the only one who can come to me. You have indeed proved your qualification. You are no longer a lowly and incompetent bastard, so I will also fully show the generosity of a king. With that, Golden King stretched out his hand and grasped the void. A moment later, a square block slowly condensed in his hand. This is my reward for you. Wang Lu stared at the block with some trepidation, thinking, could it be that my reward for breaking through the boundary between mortals and gods is the soap personally given by Golden King? Chapter 353. Your Majesty, how should I say this? Wang Lu hesitantly opened his mouth, his mind rapidly turning as he prepared his lines. For Golden King, although the legends about him were more negative than positive, such as being a tyrant, bloodthirsty, and he was obsessed with his friends in his early years. However, in the trial of the king's treasure house, Golden King's support as a friendly was unquestionable. Without Golden King's several secret help on the way to the trial, Wang Lu and his group of young cultivators who hadn't even gotten the king pill would have already turned into ashes in front of the several holy ones of Holy Light religion. Moreover, according to historical records, those who could be so favored by Golden King were almost unique in his 10,000 years of rule. However, it was really difficult to bear the grace of a beauty. Golden King was indeed great, but he was not on that side. Your Majesty, I am indebted to you, but I am not the kind of person you think I am. Golden King felt a bit strange. What? You don't want it? I thought you, the cultivators of 9 regions, came here mainly for this thing. Wang Lu was suddenly stunned. When he took a closer look, he couldn't help but exclaim, what the F***CK? The cube in Golden King's hand was not the imaginary soap with infinite information, but a simple and unadorned key imprinted with the ancient characters of 9 regions. Speaking of the key, a guess suddenly flashed through Wang Lu's mind, and it was also the only guess. Not only him, the entire Wanxian League of 9 regions cultivators came to the Western continent for this key. The key to the group of immortal tombs. Sure enough, it's here. Wang Lu gently sighed. His own guess was finally confirmed. The key to the group of immortal tombs was indeed in the king's treasure house. Although there were still too many questions, such as how did the key to the group of immortal tombs fall into the hands of Golden King, the key was already in front of him, so those questions were no longer important. However, Wang Lu did not have much joy or sense of accomplishment. Compared with this key to the group of immortal tombs, everything he did in the Western continent was far more significant. So much so that, for a while, he couldn't even think of this key. After experiencing so many ups and downs in the king's treasure house, the final result was this key? Wang Lu could not help but be somewhat stunned. While Wang Lu was stunned and silent, Golden King had thrown the key to Wang Lu. Take it, this is your reward. Wang Lu nodded and calmly accepted the key. The so-called thunder, rain, and dew were the grace of the monarch. The key to the group of immortal tombs was much better than the golden soap, so he had no reason to refuse. As for the others, a person could not be too greedy. The reason why the Holy Light religion people were deprived of their administrator authority and disintegrated their ruling foundation, in the final analysis, was it not because they were too greedy? In the beginning, they must have won some of the favor of Golden King, which allowed them to become the administrator of the Golden King's treasure house. However, later on, they betrayed the trust of Golden King, regarded the king's treasure house as their own property, and wantonly manipulated it, which finally aroused the wrath of Golden King. Even though they were just wisps of remnant souls, they could still use other people's hands to inflict heavy damage to Holy Light religion. However, having said that, the the choice of Paul as the administrator was also a foreshadowing of Golden King. Otherwise, if it were Faceless One, Ferdinand, Wang Lu, and the others, they might not be able to take advantage of the loophole so easily. The so-called emperor's scheme was really imperceptible. While thinking about these trivial things, Wang Lu sighed and said, "Next." Golden King said, "Next, there's nothing for you to do here. Take your men and leave." Wang Lu froze for a moment and then nodded. The so-called "nothing for you to do here" probably referred not only to the king's treasure house, but to the entire Western continent. After helping Golden King to abolish the current administrator, Paul, the recovery of Golden King was only a matter of time. Although he didn't know the reason why he fell into a deep sleep for tens of thousands of years, the Western continent would certainly be turbulent because of him. And during this period, Golden King would never welcome a group of people from another continent to disturb him. As for Wang Lu himself, although he had indeed made a stunning contribution and won the favor of Golden King, both Wang Lu and Golden King were very clear that this was just a temporary phenomenon. However, whether it was Wang Lu or Golden King, both were very clear that this was just a temporary phenomenon. With Wang Lu's character, he was not willing to be under others. The attitude of a subject was just that. If the two of them got along for a long time, they would certainly make an offense that Golden King could not tolerate. At that time, Wang Lu would have to face an opponent whose power was comparable to that of a god, and Golden King had no choice but to personally destroy the talent that he admired. Therefore, instead of waiting for that scene to happen, it was better to avoid it in advance. After all, the Western continent was not Wang Lu's hometown. He had to go back to where he came from. This trip to the West was already long enough. Give me a month to finish it. Wang Lu was silent for a moment. After calculating the things that he could not immediately leave behind in the Western continent, he opened his mouth and said. Golden King fully demonstrated the generosity of a king. He said, "I want a complete resuscitation, which will take 3 months. That's enough. Then I'll take my leave." Wang Lu said, looked around, and then helplessly asked, "Where is the exit?" Golden King smiled and pointed to the ground under their feet. "Here." The next moment, the ground collapsed, revealing a dark and bottomless crack. Looking at it from above, they saw the towering beautiful unique pool peak, the symbol of the peak of the mortal world, the starting point of the god realm, in front of Wang Lu's eyes, like a jade pillar breaking from the middle. When the rocks cracked, the whole world was distorted. The blue and endless sky, as well as the boiling sea of clouds at the foot of the mountain, all rushed toward the center. The front of Golden King seemed to be the center of a huge whirlpool, sucking everything around him in. Wang Lu only felt that everything in front of him went black, and then the scene changed into a blue sky and white clouds. This is... Wang Lu resisted the dizziness in his head, operated his non-phase immortal heart to stabilize his mind, and then swept his eyes around. Taba City? In the distance, there was a condescending, magnificent and sacred building complex. Located at the highest point of the city, surrounded by holy light, wasn't it the holy cathedral in the center of the city? However, in addition to the cathedral that was still lit up with holy light, Taba City had undergone earth-shattering changes. The last time he entered Taba City, Wang Lu was led by the personal guard of the Master of Deep Earth City. At that time, the group was secretive, trembling with fear, and didn't stay in the city for too long. However, the bustling atmosphere of Taba City still left a deep impression. Even though Taba City has become the private property of Holy Light religion, it still carried the dream of millions of people in the continent. From all places, all levels of professions gathered here and bravely broke into the king's city. Some got the appreciation of Golden King and became rich, some died in the treasure house and became the treasure house's guardian, the Golden King's servant. Risk and reward coexisted. This was the dream place of professions in the Western continent. Taba City used to be crowded with people. Some people joked that if you threw a few stones upstairs, you could hit a few middle-order or even high-order professions. And what followed these professions here was a larger and more prosperous industrial chain. However, looking at it now, there was a bleak atmosphere in the city. On both sides of the spacious street, the shops that once endlessly hawked their wares have all closed down. The heavy traffic in front of the door has become deserted, and the breeze stirred up the floating dust, which showed a somber atmosphere. Is this, the devil has entered the village? While in a state of consternation, Wang Lu heard a moan behind him. I'm so sleepy, where is this? Wang Lu's reaction was as fast as lightning. He reached into his mustard seed bag, took out the pie, and then stuffed the speaker's mouth with his backhand. Luli, eat your food and talk less. By the way, wake up the others and let them be quiet. It stood to reason that after the end of a pleasant cooperative relationship, with Golden King's mind, he would never set up such a low-class scheme to murder Wang Lu. However, this was, after all, the base camp of Holy Light religion, so with their identity, they could not be too blatant. While Luli was eating and waking up the others, Wang Lu found a haggard middle-aged man on the street. He looked like a local resident of Taba City. However, unlike the cheerful and enthusiastic appearance of most of the locals, at this time, he seemed to be full of worry. Wang Lu took a few steps forward and stopped him, ready to ask what happened in the city. However, just as he came to the front of the man, he suddenly heard a loud thunder-like sound from the distance of the city. 3 days have passed, Holy Light religion bastards, come out. Because the sound that swept over was too strong, and the sound wave was wrapped in shocking power, for a moment, Wang Lu's primordial spirit trembled and his jade mansion buzzed. It was too late for him to identify the owner of the sound, he only felt that it was vaguely familiar. However, even though Wang Lu couldn't respond, it didn't mean that others couldn't. When Luli heard the sound, she absent-mindedly threw away the pie in her hand and said in surprise, "Uncle Tianyu?" Wang Lu didn't react for a while. "Uncle? When did Spirit Sword Mountain transfer an elder?" "No, it's Supreme Tianyu from Xingjing sect." "Supreme Tianyu?" Wang Lu suddenly remembered the Supreme Tianyu, who was known as the Mad Dog of Xingjing sect. In the past, when they met in the ancient sword tomb, Supreme Tianyu's mad dog attitude left a deep impression on him. Unexpectedly, he met this mad dog in a foreign land. However, upon careful thought, it was not strange to meet Tianyu. Since the news that the key to the group of immortal tombs might be lost in the western continent spread out, the major forces of the Wanxian League have sent their cultivators there. And the team representing the excavation management, which was also the official team of the Wanxian League, was led by the sect leader of Spirit Sword Sect, Feng Yin, accompanied by Supreme Tianyu and several other big shots. Such a luxurious lineup, whether it was analysis or action, was far superior to any other sect's team, not something that Wang Lu's group of young people could compare with. However, because the lineup was too luxurious, they did not trust each other, and their efficiency was inevitably low. Coupled with their official identity, they had to follow the rules in every move, which made the progress even slower. However, no matter how slow it had been several months since the 9 regions Wanxian League's expedition to the western continent. Feng Yin's team had been on an expedition to the capital of knowledge a long time ago. There, they should have found enough evidence to prove that the key to the group of immortal tombs was lost in the king's treasure house. The subsequent development was not difficult to guess. Obviously, the Wanxian League could not persuade Holy Light religion to open the door of the treasure house and let them look for the key. Moreover, Holy Light religion's strategy in the eastern city-states had offended the people of 9 regions, so the conflict between the two sides was inevitable. It was just that, contrary to Wang Lu's expectation, the strong people of the Wanxian League were too heaven-defying. In just a few months, they actually killed their way to the headquarters of Holy Light religion. Chapter 354. 3 days have passed. Are you going to obediently open the city gate by yourself? Or do you want me to personally open the gate for you? A thunderous explosion swept through the city, and the mad dog roar of Supreme Tianyu changed the color of the sky. The clear sky was suddenly covered with dark clouds, and the holy dome of the Holy Cathedral of Holy Light religion was also covered with a layer of haze. Seeing this scene, Wang Lu sighed with emotion that the name of Xingjing Mad Dog was indeed well-deserved. Supreme Tianyu was an elder of Unity stage, so his strength was indeed not weak, but according to the cultivation level of the two continents, he was nothing more than the legendary level. Even if he came from a famous sect and his real strength was a bit higher than his cultivation level, it was only at the level of Aya, far from enough to have a head-on confrontation with the Holy Light religion, let alone running to their door to clamor for a fight. However, Tianyu was really that arrogant. Previously in the ancient sword tomb, when he saw his mad dog biting people, he was certainly annoyed, but now that they were in the same trench, facing the same opponent, the mad dog roar of Tianyu sounded so sweet. Pitiful non-believer, the glory of the Holy Light cannot be blasphemed by anyone. Suddenly, the holy dome of the holy cathedral shot out a platinum-colored beam of light straight into the sky, piercing through the thick dark clouds. Behind the dark clouds, the light poured down, illuminating the surroundings. An old man wearing a white robe and a golden-red cloak, holding a curved scepter, slowly walked out from the entrance of the holy cathedral. Although his pace was slow, each step crossed a long distance. Treading on the void, he climbed up the stairs, and within 3 steps, he stood at a height of 1 kilometer. As he walked, the light that fell from the sky gradually converged and resonated with the old man and the holy city of Taba below him. The holy light on the ground and the holy light in the sky converged together, creating a holy ring in the sky. In the blink of an eye, it spread for hundreds of miles, and within the scope of the ring, all living things were revived and full of vitality. At the same time, in the holy city, many closed doors were opened, and the haggard residents came to the streets, worshipping the vision in the sky. And from their exclamation, Wang Lu learned the identity of the person in the sky. The leader of the Holy Light religion, the Pope Billy III, who stood at the peak of the hundreds of millions of Holy Light believers. Although he has been the enemy of Holy Light religion for a long time, this was the first time that he saw the leader of the church. Pope Billy III was not a dignified leader, but, even a dog, if the holy light from the sky and the earth converged in one place, and the light shone in all directions, it would appear endlessly majestic. Wang Lu had already faced the Holy One of the church in the king's treasure house, but that was a defective product with most of their power suppressed by the sea of clouds. But now, what he saw was the power of the legendary Holy One who had reached the peak of the continent. Moreover, he didn't even try to cover it up. Looking at the waves of holy light sweeping around, Wang Lu really wanted to thank the Golden King for sending him to Taba City. The strength of a real legendary Holy One was far beyond imagination. Were it not for the resonance between the holy city and the Pope, making it unaffected by the waves of holy light, the Pope's breath alone was enough to purify him, the Eastern heretic. Even if his non-phase sword defense was famous for being good at defense, it still could not offset the huge power gap between him and the Pope. Such an opponent, even if he looked up at him, it would be enough to blind his dog eyes, not to mention a direct confrontation. At least, Wang Lu never wanted to face such an enemy, no matter what. However, right now, he didn't need to worry about how to deal with the Pope. The mad dog Tianyu had taken the initiative to bite the hardest bone in the Western continent. Thus, what Wang Lu needed to do was to be a strong onlooker. TSK, the number 1 legendary person in the Western continent against the number 1 mad dog in the 9 regions. This scene, this lineup, if I don't take out my treasured props from many years, it would be unjustifiable. While saying that, Wang Lu took out his treasured props from his mustard seed bag, a large barrel of honey grapefruit tea, a large bag of popcorn, and a small folding stool. He then found a shady place to sit down. Relying on his amazing eyesight as a cultivator, he was able to see the changes in the sky. On one side was the Pope Billy III, who was backed by the holy city and had the surging power of holy light. On the other side was the lone supreme Tianyu, who was treading on dark clouds. The two of them looked at each other across the sky, both of them restrained themselves. However, the confrontation of momentum gradually unfolded. It stood to reason that the strength of Supreme Tianyu should be slightly inferior to the Pope. However, at this time, he was facing the Pope. His raging demonic power filled the air, which once again gathered the dark clouds that had just been dispersed. The dark clouds were as thick as a blanket, making the holy city of the church look like a lonely island in the sea. For a time, the momentum of Supreme Tianyu was not at a disadvantage. Interesting, in the end, the division of strength between 9 regions and Western continent is wrong. The so-called legendary level is not as powerful as imagined. Or did Tianyu have a breakthrough recently? A few months ago, when they met in the ancient sword tomb, Tianyu had just entered the unity stage. Conversely, he was only one step away from the peak deity stage. Although he was much luckier than the countless cultivators who were trapped in the peak deity stage since ancient times, to go one step further was as difficult as ascending to the sky. Could it be that easy for Tianyu to make a breakthrough? Forget it, it's useless to think too much. Let's just wait and see. Wang Lu shook his head and beckoned Aya and the others, who had just been woken up by Lu Li, to sit down with him. Aya, Lu Li, little Bai, quickly sit down. The good show is about to begin. Do you want some popcorn? Aya waved her hand and politely refused. Her complexion was dignified. Obviously, she was not in the mood to watch the show and eat the popcorn. Wang Lu knew that she probably experienced something in the last pass in the sea of clouds. Her mood was very complicated, so he didn't force her. In any case, Lu Li was next to him, so he didn't need to worry about selling the popcorn. Sure enough, as soon as Lu Li sat down next to him, her soft body leaned over, her small head poked into Wang Lu's chest and said, "Senior brother, I want to eat popcorn, can you feed me?" "Feed you? What are you doing by yourself?" Wang Lu said as he turned his head. He found that Lu Li's left hand was holding a cup of hot honey pomelo tea, but her right hand was disabled and couldn't hold it, so she could only ask Wang Lu for help. Wang Lu helplessly sighed. "Can't you put down the cup in your left hand? You're stupider than a bear." Then he reached out to grab a few popcorn and put it into the girl's mouth. Lu Li smiled sweetly and dexterously licked off the honey on Wang Lu's finger with the tip of her tongue. Wang Lu suddenly felt that this girl seemed to be more like a pet than Quan Zouhua. Then he heard a woman's voice from the other side, "Yo, so considerate, I want it too." Wang Lu couldn't help but laugh. He didn't expect that Lu Li's disease was contagious. Even the well-behaved Xiao Bai was. "Hey, this isn't Xiao Bai's voice, right?" Turning his head, Wang Lu was surprised to see a very familiar face. Soft and lazy big eyes, a pure face without any makeup, a neat ponytail, and a pure white dress that seemed to never be changed for 100,000 years. It was none other than. The woman smiled sweetly, reached out and put a popcorn in her mouth. "Long time no see." Wang Lu swallowed with some difficulty and reluctantly said, "Long time no see indeed. Master." Suddenly, the one who appeared next to Wang Lu was his master, the 5th elder of Lingjian's school. "Why are you here?" After a brief moment of consternation, Wang Lu immediately asked. If he remembered correctly, his master did propose to join the excavation management's Western expedition team. However, she was quickly rejected by the sect leader. The reason was that he was afraid that she would do something shameful in the Western continent, which would implicate the sect and even the reputation of the 9 regions Wuxia League. How come now? Upon hearing her disciple's question, Wang Wu snorted, reached out her hand, took out a folding chair from Wang Lu's mustard seed bag, spread it out, and then sat down. She then sneered and said, "Not only me. This time, there are a lot of people from the Wuxia League. Even the barbarian guerrillas of Royal Soldier Sect have come, so how could sect leader control me? What exactly happened in the past few months?" In the past few months, Wang Lu spent most of his time in Dragon City, so he was relatively isolated from the news. He only knew that a lot of cultivators from 9 regions had gathered in the east, and then formed an alliance with the local people to crusade against Holy Light religion. However, he didn't expect that the Wuxia League would actually send a large number of reinforcements. His master spread out her hands. "Isn't this obvious? It's an all-out war." "All-out war? How could it be so serious?" His master looked up at the sky and then nodded. It seems like the two of them still have to show off for a while. Since I have time, I'll tell you about it. After listening to his master's simple narration, Wang Lu realized that in the past few months, the situation in the Western continent had changed constantly. Although his adventure in the Dragon City and the King's treasure house was wonderful, it was still far from being the protagonist. In simple terms, what happened was like this. With the Excavation Management's Western Continent Expeditionary Force crossing the sea to the west, the Western continent seemed to have become a dreamy land full of treasures. For a time, cultivators from various sects in 9 regions came one after another. However, when people arrived at the Western continent, they found that it was far from as beautiful as they expected. Not to mention the wall of law and other issues, just the holy light religion in the eastern city-states instigated the hunting teams against the cultivators of 9 regions, which caused the cultivators of 9 regions to suffer heavy losses and complain incessantly. For example, the Excavation Management's Western Continent Expeditionary Force was naturally not affected. However, many of the teams from the small sects were simply wiped out. The design and dissemination of the blood-stained scroll by Holy Light Religion was initially just to separate the long-term cooperative relationship between the eastern city-states and 9 regions. However, when more and more 9 regions cultivators died under the blood-stained scroll, the seriousness of the problem went out of control. In the beginning, the focus of the anger of the 9 regions' people was the eastern city-states. After all, people died in the territory of the eastern city-states, so the responsibility could not be shirked. However, the eastern people, of course, did not want to bear the responsibility of so many lives, so they frankly said that everything was a conspiracy of Holy Light Religion. However, the people of Holy Light Religion did it very cleanly and did not leave any reliable evidence. The eastern city-states and 9 regions cultivators have jointly investigated for a long time, but they still could not find anything. Thus, the eastern people suddenly suffered in silence. And just when the situation was in a mess, the matter reached the ears of the Excavation Management's Expeditionary Force. Of course, this team represented the Wanxian League, which was the most authoritative and official 9 regions team in the Western continent. When those small sects were wronged and had no one to reason with, they could only seek help from the Expeditionary Force. It just so happened that Feng Yin, who led the team, went alone to the capital of knowledge. The temporary leader of the team was the representative of Xingjing sect, Supreme Tianyu. After Tianyu learned the ins and outs of the matter, he burst into laughter and said, "Can't find the murderer? You bunch of idiots, isn't that simple? Come with me." With that, he went straight to the largest church of Holy Light Religion in the eastern continent, Storm Wind City. The monster blade fell from the sky and massacred the entire city, as well as the tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians in the city. If you can't find the murderer, then kill all the Western continent people. The murderer is always among these people. Chapter 355. Over the past few months, many people have speculated that if Feng Yin did not leave the team and continued to control the overall situation, things would have developed differently. Unfortunately, there were not that many ifs in the world. Supreme Tianyu massacred the city with his demon knife. Tens of thousands of civilians were plunged into misery and suffering. When this matter came out, the whole continent was shocked, and the reputation of the 9 regions people also fell to the bottom. However, this was followed by the attention on the blood-stained scroll. After all, this was the starting point of everything. Even a mad dog like Tianyu would not massacre a city for no reason. After cutting down Storm City, Tianyu left a bloody cloud in the sky above Storm City. The cloud formed a line of words: "Blood vengeance can only be washed away with blood." In the Western continent, there were many people who understood the language of 9 regions. After these words were translated and spread, people came to know that there was such a story behind the massacre. When the eyes of the whole continent were focused on this matter, the situation of Holy Light Religion became particularly difficult. No matter how beautiful their work was, no matter how clean their hands were, they could not resist the investigation of the whole world. Soon, countless clues were dug out, and all the evidence pointed to Holy Light Religion. For this kind of thing, people did not blame the Holy Light religion for being despicable and sinister. Any large organization would inevitably do some dirty things in the dark, especially religious organizations, which were even more sanctimonious. However, if they were caught doing bad things, then they could only blame themselves for being stupid. Holy Light religion also suffered in silence. How could they be willing to make this matter known to the whole world? It was just that things changed too fast for them to react. When the Bloodstained Scroll was first designed, the expeditionary force of the Wuxia League excavation management had not yet been formally established, and Holy Light religion only targeted those individual cultivators. Who would have thought that not long after the Bloodstained Scroll strategy was set, a large number of 9 regions people swarmed in. The Holy Light religion organization was bloated, so unless it was a matter of life and death for the church, the efficiency of the implementation of the decision was not high. Thus, they did not respond in the first place. By the time Tianyu massacred the whole world, it was already too late. When 9 regions cultivators went to the western continent to massacre a city, it would inevitably cause a strong backlash from the whole continent. However, after Holy Light religion was caught, things became delicate. After a complicated brewing, the forces of the western continent finally acquiesced that the two sides would deal with it alone. The rest of the forces would not help Holy Light religion, let alone the people of 9 regions. More or less, there was a sense of beating a drowning dog. The occupation of Taobao City by Holy Light religion has, after all, somewhat angered the public. In short, the next development was the grievance between Holy Light religion and the people of 9 regions. On the 9 regions side, under the leadership of the mad dog Tianyu, they pressed forward step by step, completely ignoring the disadvantage of time and place. In particular, Supreme Tianyu himself, regardless of the identity or the rules, regardless of whether the opponent was strong or weak, as long as they belonged to Holy Light religion, he would kill them without mercy. The number of people who died under his monster knife was in the tens of thousands. Under this mad dog offensive, the people of 9 regions destroyed hundreds of churches in one fell swoop and beheaded more than 10 archbishops. Holy Light religion was shocked. After the shock came the counterattack. Although Holy Light religion was initially caught off guard, they were, after all, the most powerful force in the Western continent with deep heritage. Once they recovered, their fierce counterattack was not something that the scattered soldiers of 9 regions could match. Overnight, they laid an inescapable net in the eastern front line. On the second day, more than 109 regions cultivators fell, many of which were King Pill's Yuanying stage and above experts. Seeing that the situation was bad, it was still Supreme Tianyu who bravely stepped forward. This Unity stage expert once again displayed the mad dog spirit, abandoning his fellow cultivators to go deep into the enemy line alone. Relying on his profound cultivation base, he slaughtered his way in and out of the Holy Light religion territory. During this period, regardless of whether it was soldiers or civilians, he killed anyone he saw. Within 3 days, he massacred more than 100,000 people. To deal with a Holy One, the only way was to dispatch a Holy One. However, at this time, 2 of the 5 Holy Ones of Holy Light religion were held back in the king's treasure house, while the remaining 1 must guard the border and could not move. The remaining 2, the Pope and the Prophet, could not leave the holy city to personally chase after a mad dog. However, Tianyu's crazy killing also aroused the anger of the Western continent people. Several neutral legendary level powerhouses joined forces to intercept him and finally blocked him. However, at this time, the support of the 9 regions people also arrived. Led by Xingjing's sect, the 5 uniques of the Wuxia League came to the Western continent. As many as 5 Supreme of Unity stage came to the Western continent, and the rest were countless deity stage and Yuanying stage. Naturally, such a force was far inferior to the entire Western continent. However, it was difficult for any single party in the Western continent to match them. Unlike the 9 regions, the Western continent did not have a Wuxia League that could unite tens of thousands of cultivators. In a situation where the Western continent people were still in a state of disunity, an all-out war with the 9 regions cultivators would only result in a lose-lose situation. Not to mention that the 9 regions' people also had the power of the eastern city-states, so the scale could not be ignored. Therefore, the issue had to be pushed back to the negotiation table. There were 2 conditions for the 9 regions' people. The first was to open the king's treasure house and let the 9 regions' people look for the key to the group of immortal tombs. The second was that Holy Light religion must pay the price for the previous hunting of the 9 regions' cultivators. However, Holy Light religion could not agree to these 2 conditions. The key to the group of immortal tombs was locked in the king's treasure house, and the king's treasure house was the foundation of the Holy Light religion, so how could they easily show it to others? As for the hunting of the 9 regions' cultivators, if Holy Light religion had to pay the price for this, how could Supreme Tianyu pay for the 100,000 deaths? If you want us to agree to this condition, you have to tie up that evildoer Tianyu and send him to the altar to be purified by the sea of holy light. However, how could Supreme Tianyu agree to this condition? Regarding the condition of Holy Light religion, Tianyu laughed wildly. Sure, let your pope, prophet, and so on come out naked. Let me chop off their heads one by one with my dog-head broadsword, then I will be captured without a fight and accept your purification. If this kind of wrangling continued, it would be endless. Finally, it was Feng Yin who came forward to negotiate the conditions. Since this matter is difficult to satisfy both sides, and should not be completely resorted to force, then let's use a compromise method. Feng Yin said, 3 days later, under the holy city of your Holy Light religion, we will be on one side, and Holy Light religion on the other. We are on one side, and Holy Light religion on the other side. Each side will send out 3 people to fight one-on-one. If we are lucky enough to win all 3 fights, then please agree to our 2 conditions. If we win 2 and lose 1, then we will not owe each other anything. We will immediately withdraw from the Western continent and no longer attempt to dip our fingers into your sex treasure house. But if we lose both times, then we will be at your disposal. Whether you want to kill or dismember, do as you please. This was one of the unique cultures of 9 regions. After some discussion, Holy Light religion didn't immediately agree to it, but they also didn't refuse it. From the point of view of the conditions, Holy Light religion was still relatively favorable. As long as they could win 1 fight, they would be able to solve the immediate crisis. If they could win 2 fights, they would win a great victory. If it was a one-on-one fight, there might be suspense for others, but the strength of Pope Billy III was beyond doubt. Both of them were legendary powerhouses, but the Pope seemed to be in another realm, high and mighty. However, the people of 9 regions were cunning. Moreover, this kind of competition seemed to be a fair one-on-one fight, but in essence, it was a one-on-one fight between Holy Light religion and the Wanxian League of 9 regions. With the vastness of 9 regions, there would always be a powerhouse with strength similar to the Pope. If the other side sent out 3 popes, how could Holy Light religion fight? Oh, please rest assured that the candidates on our side are limited to the first batch of expeditionary army. Those who come later to support us will not participate. If that was the case, Holy Light religion still had some confidence. In the first batch of expeditionary army, there was only 1 Tianyu in the unity stage. The next strongest were Feng Yin in the peak deity stage and a deity stage elder of Kunlun immortal sect. As long as Holy Light religion sent out the Pope and the Prophet, their odds of winning would be more than 70%. And then you saw it. 3 days later, Tianyu came to scold us. TSK, the advantage of a mad dog is that he is always full of energy. In Holy Light City, Wang Wu was eating Wang Lu's collection of honey popcorn while sighing with emotion at Tianyu's mad dog spirit. Wang Lu frowned and said, "Is Tianyu that awesome? When I first saw him in the ancient sword tomb, I felt that he was somewhat like a human. Even though he was arrogant, he still followed the rules. Is he showing his true colors here? Even after killing 100,000 people, he is not afraid of the divine tribulation. Could it be that he has entered the devil path?" Wang Wu sneered and said, "The law in Western continent is different. There is no merit and virtue karma, so how could there be a divine tribulation? At most, it would be because he killed too many people, causing the heart demon to appear. However, with Tianyu's temperament, even if he killed 10 million people, it would not arouse his heart demon. He is originally a demon cultivator, so he has a very subtle sense of propriety. As for him following the rules in 9 regions, that is because if he doesn't follow the rules, he will die. However, in Western continent, he is unfamiliar with the people and the place. No matter how exaggerated he is, at worst, he could just leave and return to 9 regions. Could the Western continent people chase him across the sea? Would the 9 regions people blame him because he killed a group of Western continent barbarians? Since there is no responsibility to bear, of course, he would reveal his true colors. Wang Lu sighed with emotion. This idea is not wrong. Moreover, fortunately, this mad dog, can let us quickly grasp the initiative. Although Tianyu's unscrupulous behavior in Western continent shocked many people, after calming down and analyzing, it was not difficult to find that it was because of Tianyu's 2 crazy killings. One was in Storm Wind City, and the other was in the hinterland of Holy Light religion, which quickly established the strategic advantage of 9 regions. It was difficult to say whether this was Tianyu's intention or the will of heaven, but it did make him a great contribution. Do you think so? Wang Wu turned her head and looked at her disciple with a smile. There was a sense of examination in her eyes. You don't have any other idea? Wang Lu pondered for a moment and said, I must say, I am curious. When Tianyu first massacred a city, it just so happened that Uncle's sect leader went to the knowledge city alone, which gave Tianyu the opportunity. But with sect leader's steady temperament, would he leave such a big window for a mad dog? From another point of view, when the situation finally fell into a deadlock, sect leader came forward to negotiate and agreed to solve the problem with a duel. During this period, Tianyu unexpectedly did not object and completely accepted it. It's hard to imagine that it's a coincidence that he is so well behaved. Wang Wu nodded. It seems that after indulging in sensual pleasures in Western continent, you haven't been completely emptied out by wine and women. Your brain is still functioning. Master is reluctantly gratified. Damn, who told you that I indulged in sensual pleasures? You didn't? Wang Wu blinked her eyes and then looked at Lu Li and Aya for a long time. It's rare for you to be alone with them for a long time in a foreign country, yet, you actually didn't push them down? Push your sister. Wang Wu looked at her disciple with a bit of shock. Or, after not seeing each other for a while, disciple, have you become a person from that side? Wang Lu thought about Golden King's soap not long ago and sighed with emotion. Or perhaps you encountered a strong enemy here and were seriously injured, resulting in an unspeakable problem? If that's the case, you can rest assured that Master carries an emergency medicine bag with me, which will ensure that the medicine will be cured. Just as Wang Lu was about to say something, suddenly a strange light flashed in the sky. Supreme Tianyu and Pope Billy finally started their fight. Chapter 356. In the long history of the Western continent, the battle of legendary rank was not common. Once one entered the legendary rank, it was equivalent to stepping into a whole new field. In the ancient times, when the barrier between the mortal world and the heaven was not so deep, the legendary rank was called the first step to become a god. And with the opportunity to become a god, who would be willing to fight to the death? Not to mention the battle of legendary rank was too far-reaching. A little bit of carelessness could cause the land to sink, volcanoes to erupt, rivers to flow backward, and people to be plunged into misery and suffering. Although there was no heavenly tribulation in the Western continent, the special cultural tradition and the law of power made the barrier between the Western continent profession and ordinary people not so deep. Therefore, even the legendary rank would have many treasured people in the mortal world, which became their fetters. For the people of the Western continent, it has been a long time since they saw the legendary level experts go all out in a fight. In the past 100 years, although there were many fights between legendary level experts, they were basically superficial, and no one would come out with their real skills. But now, whether it was Pope Billy or Supreme Tianyu, neither of them would hide even the slightest bit. Because hiding was the same as courting death. Although this one-on-one duel was designed by Feng Yin based on the spirit of humanity to avoid excessive casualties, it was still a bloody and cruel war with no warmth. In the first round of the fight, the two sides were already angry. The first one to make a move was Tianyu. During the long confrontation of breath, Tianyu realized that the Pope was backed by the Holy City and had a powerful momentum, so he could not take any advantage. Therefore, he simply released the monster blade in his hand to seize the initiative. This weapon, which was comparable to an immortal treasure, suddenly expanded thousands of times, like a continuous mountain range, pressing down from the sky. Seeing this situation, the Pope's complexion could not help but change. Because although Tianyu's blade seemed slow and clumsy, he could not avoid it. Because Tianyu's blade was aimed at the Taba city behind the Pope. After the bewitching blade expanded thousands of times, when this blade slashed down, there was no need to add any special magic power. Just the size and weight of the blade could destroy a city and destroy a country. Although the sacred city had a spell to protect the city, it could not withstand such a powerful and heavy blade. However, as the leader of the church, how could the Pope be so easy to deal with? His expression changed. He was shocked that his opponent was still so despicable and shameless at this time, but it wasn't that he didn't have a way to deal with it. On the contrary, this kind of powerful and heavy attack was exactly what he wanted. In terms of strength, who could compare with the Holy Light religion that had hundreds of millions of believers? The Pope was the leader of millions of believers, and he was backed by the Holy City. He was confident that he would be able to fight even if the gods were to descend to earth, let alone a mere mad dog. Heretics, repent under the Holy Light. When the heavenly moon demon blade was about to reach the top of his head, the Pope raised the staff that symbolized supreme authority high up. Although it was silent, the mountain-like demon blade suddenly stopped in mid-air, unable to slash down even half an inch. However, the Pope's complexion changed again, because this saber was blocked too easily. The demon saber only had the appearance, but its true power was far from what it looked like on the surface. With the strength of Supreme Tianyu, he should not be strong in appearance but weak in reality. The Pope immediately pushed his cane upwards. The huge demon blade could not withstand it and retreated with a rumbling sound. However, after the demon blade retreated, people discovered that Supreme Tianyu, who was hiding behind the demon blade, had disappeared without a trace. Could it be that he escaped? In the Holy City, the priests that gathered near the Holy Cathedral whispered to themselves, and then watched the first round of the fight between the two supreme powerhouses with trepidation. Although the two sides did not show their real ability, and could only be regarded as a preliminary test, it was still hair-raising. None of the priests in the Holy City believed that the Pope would lose. However, in the face of the demon blade that was even bigger than the Holy City, how could they not be afraid when they were in the Holy City, in the shadow of the demon blade? Therefore, if Tianyu escaped, the fight would end here, and that would be the best. Unfortunately, how could things be that simple? How could a mad dog cultivator who dared to slaughter hundreds of thousands of people in a foreign land escape? After throwing out the demon blade to divert attention, Tianyu disappeared without a trace. The Pope was not in a hurry to pursue. Instead, he held his cane and muttered something. A moment later, an astonishing light wave spread out in a spherical shape, which, in a twinkling of an eye, spread out to hundreds of miles away. Wherever the light wave passed, people felt as if they had been seen through from the beginning to the end, and there was no longer any secret about them. Wang Lu and the others in Taba City were also within the range of the light wave. Fortunately, the fifth elder of Spirit Sword Sect was here. He pointed his emerald green bamboo sword toward the sky, and the light wave of the Pope bypassed them and didn't sweep them. Wang Lu was secretly surprised. Although the light wave just now was just casually released by the Pope, his master's sword also didn't accumulate any power. It was also casually released, yet it could easily break the spell of a legendary level Holy One, this guy. Oh, he immediately released his big move? A mad dog is indeed a mad dog, always thinking what ordinary people can't think. When Wang Lu was secretly surprised by his master's non-phase sword, Wang Wu herself put her attention on the sky and softly sighed. He immediately released his big move. Is it Tianyu? Wang Wu pointed her finger at the sky. Look at it yourself. Wang Lu looked at the sky and saw that it was still the sky with half yin and half yang. The dark clouds and the dazzling sunlight each symbolized one side, tearing each other in the sky, fighting to the death. There didn't seem to be anything special, and there was no change from before. Where's the light? I can't see the light. At this time, he heard Bai Shixian look up at the sky and exclaim. Wang Lu curiously said, Little Bai, could it be that you've evolved from Bai Shixian to cataract? As soon as his voice fell, his master slapped him on the back of his head. Idiot, you have the nerve to laugh at Little Bai, it's clear that you're ignorant. Try to use your non-phase absurd power to look at it again. Wang Lu tried to circulate his magical power, which he was not particularly proficient in, into his eyes, and then looked up again. What he saw in front of him made him greatly surprised. The sky was dark, and only the billowing dark clouds vaguely showed their outlines. The sunlight that filled the sky had disappeared without a trace. In other words, the battle between yin and yang that Tianyu had seen just now was an illusion that Tianyu had deliberately set up. He had covered the sky for hundreds of miles, or even thousands of miles, just to hide the rolling black clouds in the sky. What is this? Wang Wu explained, Tianyu was originally a monster cultivator. In the past, he was enlightened by the essence of the moonlight, and then every step of his cultivation was based on the moon. The brighter and brighter the moonlight, the stronger his strength. However, the moon waxes and wanes, so how could it always be full? So, Wang Wu stopped halfway through her sentence, because there was no need to say more. The change in the sky had shown everything. As the Pope continued to release the holy light, the illusion that shrouded the sky finally collapsed. However, as the illusion disappeared, the earth was plunged into darkness. Just now, it was clearly a sunny day, but now, it was a deep night, like it was daytime. While everyone was panicking, from the rolling dark clouds, a silver light pierced through the darkness and descended to the earth. A bright moon peeked out from behind the dark clouds. The bright moonlight washed away all the filth of the mortal world, making people feel as if they were in a dreamy fairyland. In Taba City, Wang Lu felt that it was inconceivable. Especially when he felt the familiar aura of the moonlight, he was deeply confused. Damn! It's daytime, where did the moon come from? Moreover, it's the moon of 9 regions. This familiar aura of the moonlight is not released by the moon of the western continent. Wang Wu lightly replied from the side, of course he carries it with him. The reason why he could advance from the peak of deity stage to unity stage is because of this move, the unity of heaven and earth, the body carrying the moon. That's how he got the name Supreme Tianyu. In other words, the bright moon in the sky is Tianyu himself? Yes, because the moonlight only falls at night, so he has to cast the great day and night technique first. In order to avoid being noticed by the Pope and interrupted, he used the bewitching blade and illusion as a smokescreen. Although this mad dog is crazy, his handling of the details is worth learning. Watch carefully, this level of battle is rare. While speaking, Wang Wu's complexion gradually became dignified. At this time, the Pope's complexion in the sky above Taba City was particularly heavy. When the heavenly moon appeared, even if he was not familiar with the characteristics of Tianyu's method, he knew that he had fallen into the opponent's plot, which delayed the time, causing the situation to be somewhat passive. However, the more this was the case, the more he couldn't be impatient. Even though he was confident that he had the advantage in strength, whether it was in the east or west continent, the characteristics of the moon were soft and changeable, good at using softness to overcome hardness. If he was not careful, the advantage in strength would be easily taken advantage of. At the same time, the 9 regions cultivators who watched the fight were also curious. At this time, Tianyu had already cast the great day and night technique and the bright moon in the sky, and his strength had climbed to the peak, allowing him to display his demon method and immortal method to his heart's content. However, the Pope also responded in an instant. he projected the sea of holy light into the world. Although it could not break the great day and night technique, it made the holy city into a sea of light. The remains of the 13 deceased holy ones in the holy cathedral resonated with the holy light. A moment later, the 13 holy ones in the sky surrounded the Pope, and their imposing manner soared to the sky. One attack and one defense, both sides had their own unique moves, which was breathtaking. In contrast, Tian Yu's swordsmanship was unconventional and had a series of tricks, while the Pope used his strength to break the skillful move. Wait a minute, didn't they say it's one-on-one? What's with these 13 thugs? In the distance, some of the 9 region spectators raised their doubts. They're called beasts. Our Wanxian League's beast control sect cultivators also bring dogs when they fight. In this way, the Pope only released 13 human-shaped fierce dogs, which was in line with the rules. However, the holy light priests who were watching the fight with the 9 regions people from the side had gloomy faces. However, after a few words, they turned their attention back to the sky. Next, in the face of the power of the Pope, how would Tian Yu use the great day and night technique to contend against the Pope and his 13 holy ones? People were waiting to see. Suddenly, several sharp-eyed spectators exclaimed, "Look at the sky." In the sky, the bright moon trembled slightly, like a boulder touching water, stirring up a circle of ripples. The next moment, the bright moon dived down. Chapter 357. Since ancient times, there had been too many things falling from the sky, from small fragments of meteorites to large burning meteors. There was no lack of blessings from the heavens on the earth, and many kinds of meteorite metals were essential materials for forging divine weapons. For many professions in the Western continent, the attack from the sky was not uncommon. Those high-order magicians could summon huge meteorites from the 9th heaven. After a long acceleration, a room-sized meteorite could destroy a city. Although the attack was simple and crude, it was really powerful. However, while the power was boundless, this overly simple and direct attack was often easy to be cracked. For high-order professions, there were too many ways to avoid the pure physical damage, which was twice the result with half the effort. Meteorites were mostly used to bully the weak. Then, at this moment, when people saw the full moon falling from the sky above their heads, like a demon king that could destroy the world, their hearts were stupefied. Under the great pressure, not to mention the ability to think normally, even fear, panic, and other emotions couldn't be aroused. Those in Taba City, those who were watching the battle from dozens of miles away, and those who were watching the battle from thousands of miles away, all of them were sincerely shocked by this miracle at this moment. Falling moon. It turned out to be falling moon. There was actually such a terrifying spell in the world. Even though the moon formed by Supreme Tian Yu was far less than the diameter of a real full moon, if this terrifying giant fell to the ground, not to mention a mere holy city, perhaps the entire Western continent would tremble. The land within thousands of miles around the holy city would sink, lava would erupt, and all life would be cut off. If a Supreme of Unity stage used all of his energy to destroy, he could indeed destroy all the people on the path. No one thought that such an attack could be withstood, and it was even impossible to divert the force to the side. The power was so huge that it was hard to imagine that this was a spell that belonged to a mortal. Turning oneself into a moon and falling straight down, perhaps even the legendary moon god was just like this. Moreover, how could a mortal resist the attack of a god? While everyone was dumbfounded, the Pope still maintained his calm. With a calm face, he waved his scepter, and the 13 holy ones around him turned into 13 lightning bolts and flew in different directions, disappearing from everyone's sight in a flash. Spread out? If he didn't gather his strength and fight to the death, how could he disperse his strength? Is he giving up on this round? Among the spectators, there was no lack of negative conjectures. They thought that the Pope did not want to fight head-on, lest both sides suffer. However, in the next moment, the 13 pillars of light that shot into the sky made these people realize how shallow they were. The 13 pillars of light appeared in different parts of the continent. The furthest from each other was nearly 1,000 miles away, but all of them pierced through the clouds. All of them came from the places of faith under the jurisdiction of the Church. Eternal Summer City, Rainbow Forest, Flaming Canyon, each of them was the holy land of holy light religion that had written countless legends for thousands of years. The 13 holy lands were ignited by the 13 holy ones at the same time. The accumulated holy light for thousands of years violently erupted, as if to tear the entire sky. At this moment, as the leader of the Church and the number one representative of the sea of holy light in the mortal world, how could he possibly escape? Behind him was the foundation of the Church. If he escaped, how could holy light religion have the face to command hundreds of millions of believers? Proclaim the greatness of the holy light to the people? Therefore, the Pope could only face it head-on, only by using stronger power and more overbearing means to overwhelm the opponent. And as the strongest legend in the Western continent, Pope Billy was confident that he could do it. Even though the opponent's spell had set foot in the realm of God, at this moment, backed by the pious faith of hundreds of millions of people, the Pope was confident that he could even fight against a true God. Heretic, the sea of holy light will destroy you. The Pope loudly roared, raised the scepter in his hand, and issued a command that symbolized the highest authority of the sea of holy light. Under him, the holy city of the Church suddenly burst out with astonishing energy. In the Church area, the holy light was as thick as a substance, wrapping everything in it. A moment later, the holy dome of the holy cathedral was smashed, and a vortex with infinite suction force was formed. The 13 pillars of light in the distance were instantly drawn and gathered in one place. What came out was a sea of light. Sea of holy light. The Pope is summoning the real sea of holy light. In the holy city, several high-order priests inconceivably looked at the light that converged in the sky. A moment later, tears flowed down their cheeks and their knees trembled. That light carried a majesty that was difficult to look straight at. Even the Pope was as small as a speck of dust compared to it. That was a majesty that did not belong to the human world, only God could have. The belief of holy light religion was not a personified God, so the only thing that could suppress the hundreds of millions of believers was the real sea of holy light. It was not a projection summoned by the believers, but the real thing. This was also one of the few times in the history of holy light religion that the real sea of holy light descended. Over the holy city, the platinum light was boundless. From a height of thousands of meters, it spread upward for tens of thousands of miles, occupying a small half of the vast western continent. Moreover, it continued to expand, like a real endless sea, swallowing everything in the continent. At the same time, all the forces in the western continent were shocked. Did holy light religion want to take this opportunity to sweep the continent with the absolute strength of the sea of holy light? However, before they could react, the falling moon of Tianyu finally broke through the clouds and came to the world, colliding head-on with the platinum sea of holy light. At first, it was silent. There was no earth-shattering collapse, no landslides or tsunamis. The sea of holy light gently embraced the falling moon, and the falling momentum of the full moon suddenly slowed down. Its speed from thousands of miles in the sky rapidly slowed down. This slowing momentum was silent but irreversible. Tianyu's world-shaking falling moon technique seemed unstoppable, but in the end, under the obstruction of the sea of holy light, it became slower and slower. Water is the power of tolerance, and the endless vast sea of holy light has the mind to tolerate everything. In the holy city, there was a burst of cheers. The holy light religion believers shouted, "Long live the Pope," and celebrated the victory in advance. In their view, the omnipotent holy light has purified the sin, so victory was only a matter of time. However, soon, everyone heard a tearing buzz, like the precursor of an earthquake and tsunami. However, when they looked around, the mountains and rivers were as stable as ever, without any tremor. It's the space is trembling. The complexion of several high-order professions with keen perception changed as they perceived the instability of the space. They immediately realized that the head-on collision of the two powerful forces in the sky was a great burden to the entire space. And once the space collapsed, it would be a disaster for the heaven and earth. However, at this moment, who could intervene in the battle between the two of them? As the full moon struggled to break through layer by layer under the obstruction of the sea of holy light, the aftermath of the energy continued to pour down to the ground, sweeping everything on the ground. Some of the weak spectators hiding in the wilderness were instantly blown away by the sweeping energy. And the general high-order professions also felt oppressive and heavy. The aftermath was already like this, so no one could get close to the main battlefield of the battle. Fortunately, the space of the western continent was, after all, more stable than people imagined. Although it continued to tremble and groan, it never really cracked. And as time went by, the situation of the battle began to tilt in favor of one side, the Pope's side. The full moon began to find it difficult to continue. Wrapped in the sea of holy light, its falling momentum became slower and slower. From breaking through the clouds to nearly 100 miles from the ground, it finally almost stopped, unable to move forward even half an inch. With its unparalleled tolerance, the sea of holy light resolved the momentum of the falling moon. Moreover, it seemed that it still had plenty to spare. However, this time, Supreme Tianyu could no longer have any tricks up his sleeves. The gap in strength was already clear at a glance. The Pope's stage was slightly higher than him, not to mention that he still had the holy city of Taba and hundreds of millions of believers behind him. The holy city and the believers were no doubt a burden, but they were also a powerful help. A pope with the holy city behind him was not much different from a god. Moreover, Supreme Tianyu's bright moon in the sky could only reach a higher stage at the moment of falling, so how could it be compared with the pope? Even though the falling full moon was only a counterfeit of Tianyu's incarnation, it still seemed very oppressive. However, being quietly held in the air by the sea of holy light, it seemed somewhat powerless. Good, the first round is really won. A senior archbishop heaved a long sigh of relief and withdrew his gaze from the sky. The church and the 9 regions people agreed on 3 rounds of competition, and the Pope stepped forward. Sure enough, they won a good start. However, in the second round, it was difficult for them to have a full grasp. Although the prophet had a pair of godlike eyes, he was not good at fighting. Moreover, after the Pope summoned the sea of holy light, the accumulation of holy light religion in the past 1,000 years was almost squandered, so it could no longer provide any powerful support to the prophet. However, if they could win one of the 3 rounds, the church would be in an invincible position. Thus, driving these 9 regions' heretics out of the western continent was barely an acceptable result. However, just as people began to calculate the next step, a sudden change disrupted everything. Taba City disappeared. There was no sign, no sound. Just a moment ago, Taba City was the most important pillar for the Pope to summon the sea of holy light, simultaneously absorbing the energy from the 13 holy places. The next moment, it disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared. What disappeared was not the entire Taba City, but the ancient Taba City with a long history. The residents of the city, the new buildings in recent years, the Holy Light Religion Church, and so on, were all left behind, falling on the soft sand. Some of the tall buildings soon collapsed. The residents of the city looked at the sudden change around them in disbelief, finding it hard to understand. How could Taba City disappear? Among the people present, only Wang Lu guessed that Golden King was retrieving his own treasure house. However, the timing was a bit delicate. It was difficult to say whether it was intentional by Golden King, or if Holy Light Religion was really out of luck. Because just a moment after Taba City disappeared, the sea of holy light in the sky collapsed. Summoning this great existence was essentially going against the heavens' will, and it was also a great burden for a legendary-level powerhouse. The Pope was backed by the holy city of Taba, and with the help of a long time of accumulation, he could barely do it. But once his backing disappeared. In mid-air, the old man wearing a golden red cloak and holding a scepter disappeared without a trace along with the sea of holy light. Chapter 358. In the sky, the sea of holy light and the Pope disappeared together, as if they had never appeared. The falling full moon also shattered with a loud bang, and countless fragments fell down like raindrops. At the core of the full moon, Supreme Tianyu, with a pale face, lightly wiped the trace of blood from the corner of his mouth, and then slowly flew backward, without saying a word. Inside and outside the battlefield, the spectators were all stunned. The sudden change just now was so fast that people couldn't even judge what was going on. Did Tianyu win, or did the Pope win? If the Pope won, why was Tianyu, this heretic devil, still alive? And if Tianyu won, with his mad dog-like temperament, how could he be so silent? Even if he was seriously injured, he would still loudly boast about his victory. While everyone was puzzled, from the 9 regions side, a person slowly flew over. He had a kind countenance and a sage-like demeanor. He was the highest person in charge of the 9 regions cultivators in the western continent, Feng Yin. Please send out a person from your honorable religion. Feng Yin Daoist master's voice was soft and gentle, like a breeze caressing the face. However, when he opened his mouth, everyone within a radius of thousands of miles could clearly hear his voice, as if it was right next to their ears. It showed that his magical power was quite brilliant, but not as wild as Tianyu's. It was just that, while Feng Yin was in mid-air, no one from the Holy Light religion side responded for a long time. It was not until a long time later that several bishops in the Holy Cathedral opened their mouths. The result of the previous fight is not yet decided, so it's not the turn for the next person to fight. Feng Yin smiled and didn't say anything, ignoring them. Because when those bishops raised their doubts, another person stood out from the Holy Cathedral. Like the Pope, he walked slowly, but with each step, he crossed a distance of hundreds of meters. After 3 steps, he arrived in front of Feng Yin. That person was wearing a golden red cloak, a crown on his head, and a scepter in his hand. It was the Pope's attire. With his appearance, the cheers of millions of people boiled up. It was just that, the cheers abruptly stopped after a moment because people found out that the person was not Pope Billy III, but the number 2 figure of Holy Light religion, Prophet Harrington. But why would the scepter, crown, and holy robe that symbolized the authority of the Pope appear on him? Prophet Harrington and Pope Billy have been close friends for many years. From the grassroots to the peak of Holy Light religion, Prophet Harrington's contribution cannot go unnoticed. If he wanted to rebel, how could he wait until today? Then, finally, in the midst of their shock, they realized that Pope Billy III had really fallen. Fortunately, he had his best friend, Harrington, so the position of the Pope would not be empty. After inheriting the Pope's scepter and crown, Harrington's power would not be much weaker than Billy's. Good plan. In the silence, Harrington opened his mouth coldly, his eyes full of killing intent. The prophet, who had always been modest and low-key, was now boiling with anger. You predicted that the ghosts under the holy city would cause trouble at this time, so you deliberately chose today to start the battle. You calculated that the ghosts would collude with you, so you let that demon Tianyu release his killer move, using the entire continent as a hostage to force him to summon the Sea of Holy Light with the help of the holy city. This is a series of conspiracies. You claim to fight one-on-one, but in fact, it's 2-on-1, really despicable and shameless. Upon hearing these words, everyone present suddenly understood. No wonder Tianyu didn't say anything after winning. After all, he also knew that his victory was not an honorable one. Moreover, he even borrowed the power of the Lingjian school. However, these words also confirmed that Pope Billy III had really fallen. The first battle was really won by the people of 9 regions, although this victory was indeed somewhat despicable. Despicable and shameless? If fellow Daoist Tianyu relied more or less on the power of scheming, then what about the power of faith of hundreds of millions of believers? Feng Yin didn't show any weakness. Since you're willing to bet, you must be willing to lose. Is your sect going to go back on your words? Prophet Harrington waved his scepter. No, I want you to know that because of your despicable and shameless actions, after the 2 battles, you will wear thorns and shackles, and kneel in front of the holy cathedral for thousands of years to repent for your sins. Feng Yin no longer talked nonsense. Let's wait and see. Harrington waved his scepter, and the surrounding space became dense and stagnant. Countless illusions hovered around the two of them. People vaguely saw that in the illusions, Feng Yin Daoist master's body was bathed in blood and was torn apart under the purification of the holy light. People saw that the 9 regions side was completely annihilated, and several leaders were bound in shackles and kneeling in front of the holy cathedral. People saw that the sea of holy light once again descended on the western continent, and the supreme light purified all the heretics. Harrington loudly roared, "I have seen the future. That is the future of your destruction." Along with his roar, the surrounding illusions rapidly changed and finally stopped at the scene where Feng Yin was purified by the holy light. Thousands of virtual images gradually condensed, as if they wanted to turn the virtual into the real, the fake into the real. Great prophecy, this is the prophet's great prophecy. Many people in the cathedral exclaimed. Prophet Harrington had not made a serious move for many years. Now that he inherited the power of the Pope, the power of his great prophecy was several times stronger than before. Harrington's eyes seemed to be able to understand the cause and effect of this world, and with his skillful manipulation, he directly changed the fate. This was not only a legendary level method, but also close to the level of God. At this time, even if they were not familiar with the power system of the Western continent, they could still see the brilliance of it. All the cultivators of 9 regions who participated in the battle were on tenterhooks. Even Supreme Tianyu might not be able to resist this move. Although Feng Yin Daoist master was the leader of one of the 5 uniques, after all, he was just a peak deity stage cultivator. However, Feng Yin himself was not in a hurry. Facing the oppressive illusion, he just lightly waved his hand and said a few words. "You're wrong." The next moment, the thousands of illusions vanished. "You!" Harrington, who was in mid-air, looked at Feng Yin in disbelief, and then his expression gradually turned serious. Previously, when Pope Billy fought against Supreme Tianyu, Harrington had made several prophecies before the battle, trying to gain some advantage for the Pope. However, without exception, all of them were hidden behind a layer of fog. Obviously, it was deliberately disturbed by a powerful person. And now, it seemed that the person who could disturb his prophecy was the person in front of him. "You're the prophet of 9 regions?" Upon hearing this, Feng Yin sighed. "Prophet? I'm just an old thing who can't even distinguish the T sword from the year sword. I can't even say that I can do the divination." The dialogue between the two of them was in their native language. Because in their realm, their words were the law, and their magical power was constantly changing, so the meaning was naturally understood. However, for many of the spectators, the dialogue between the two seemed obscure and difficult to understand. A young cultivator, who was an elder who came to watch the battle, was puzzled. What is Feng Yin Daoist master talking about? Although he has always been low-key and modest, in front of Western continent people, is it necessary to be so modest? Just kill him quickly and win the second round, like Supreme Tianyu, the faster the better. As soon as his voice fell, his master's palm fell on his head. Don't talk nonsense. Do you think that Western continent people are so easy to kill? Do you think it's easy for Supreme Tianyu to kill the Pope? For the cultivators of the elder generation who came to watch the battle, these 2 battles were soul-stirring. Supreme Tianyu's bright moon in the sky and the Pope's sea of holy light were already God-level means. Even the aftermath of the battle was enough to make these nascent soul and soul formation cultivators tremble. The successor of the Pope, Harrington, seemed to be weaker than Billy, but his great divination technique was also infinitely powerful. It directly obliterated the opponent from the level of cause and effect. Although it was not as brilliant as the Sea of Holy Light, its power could not be underestimated. If it was anyone else present, even Supreme Tianyu might not be able to withstand it. Only Feng Yin Daoist master, a cultivator who was famous in the Wanxian League for his stellar diffraction technique, could easily crack the opponent's cause and effect attack. No, it was not easy at all. That wave of his hand could probably extract more than half of the magical power of ordinary peak deity stage cultivators. No matter how powerful Feng Yin was, it was impossible for him to do it easily. "You're very powerful," Harrington coldly said, "but Holy Light religion has eliminated too many powerful opponents in the past thousands of years." Feng Yin said with a smile, "Powerful? You flatter me. I'm just a third-rate fortune teller. I can barely calculate 1 or 2 steps in the future. Anything further than that, I'm powerless." Regarding Feng Yin's indifferent attitude, Harrington didn't think that he was being humble and low-key, but rather a deep pride. Therefore, he decided not to talk nonsense with him anymore. He raised his scepter and once again tried to use the supreme authority of the Holy Light to command the cause and effect. However, at this time, he heard Feng Yin sigh. "It's about time for this meaningless battle to end." While speaking, he raised his hand. A row of silver flying swords flew out from his wide sleeve and pierced the sky. At this time, the day and night left by Supreme Tianyu had not yet disappeared. Although the dark clouds above their head gradually dispersed, they still covered half of the sky. The row of flying swords pierced the clouds, and the sky once again became as if it was dyed with thick ink. The next moment, the flying swords burst into thousands of fragments, which dotted the thick darkness like a dazzling galaxy. "This is the move of my humble star sword technique, please advise me." While speaking, Feng Yin pointed the sword in his right hand downwards. Then, the galaxy fell to the ground and turned into a huge silver sword that pierced straight down. Although it was with the help of the spell left by Supreme Tianyu, the power of this sword was not inferior to the bright moon in the sky. Harrington's face was extremely solemn. The target of the Great Prophecy spell was also locked on this huge sword. Then, he spoke in a deep voice, which resounded in all directions. "In front of the Holy Light, the blasphemous weapon will stagnate." While speaking, the galaxy sword seemed to be slightly stagnant for a moment. "My eyes can penetrate the long river of time and witness the rise and fall of all things." Around the long sword, countless illusions were generated and rotated like fragments. Finally, Harrington forcefully stopped the scepter in the air. "And I have foreseen its collapse." Boom! Thousands of illusions suddenly stopped rotating and stuck to the surface of the long sword. As the prophecy spell reached the last step, the power of cause and effect broke out. The long sword groaned and finally collapsed. At the same time, Harrington's face froze before he could put on a smile. A sharp long sword was pressed against his neck. In front of him, Feng Yin tilted his head and said in a low voice, "This is the star sword techniques." Diversion. Chapter 359. Generally speaking, Feng Yin Daoist master was a man of simple character and pure moral integrity. When he was a member of the standing committee of the Wanxian League, he had always been low-key and modest. Therefore, even the 9 regions cultivators who were most looking forward to his victory did not expect that he would use this kind of tasteless trick. For a time, the battlefield was completely silent. Feng Yin Daoist master turned his head sideways, seemingly a bit embarrassed. This tasteless way to win was not his intention. It was just that when Harrington went all out to fight against the galaxy sword, his flaws were so big that he, as a practical cultivator, could not hold back. It could be seen that Harrington's actual combat experience was very shallow. He had been hiding behind Billy all his life as an advisor, giving advice and foreseeing the future. Although he had a more detached posture than Billy, it also caused him to seriously lack actual combat experience, especially in the face of a powerhouse of the same level. He inherited the power of the Pope, but he could not inherit the Pope's actual combat experience. In the face of an opponent like Feng Yin, he would lose everything in just one move. In 9 regions, a cultivator who relied on his experience to bully a newcomer was not honorable. Therefore, although Feng Yin didn't show any mercy in his victory, thinking that there was a group of onlookers not far away, he couldn't bear to lose face. Good move. Although Harrington had a sharp sword on his body, he was not in a hurry. But do you think you've won? Then cut it down. Feng Yin chuckled. I have also heard of the Holy Light Religion's immortal body. When the Holy Light Religion's believers reached the level of Holy Light Religion, they basically had the ability to come back from the dead. Although this ability had a strong limitation, it was still a heaven-defying ability. Although Feng Yin had gained a temporary advantage, not to mention that when he launched the Galaxy Sword, he had consumed a lot of magical power, which was not enough for him to use his full strength. Although his sword momentum was fast, it might not be able to break Harrington's Pope's robe. Moreover, even if it was broken, the opponent could still come back from the dead. At most, he lost one move, which was not important. Feng Yin said, "It's not easy to kill you, but conversely, it's not easy for you to win against me." Harrington did not say a word. He waved his scepter with all his strength and once again touched the line of cause and effect, regardless of Feng Yin's sword on his neck. It was clear that he would rather sacrifice his life to continue fighting. Although his combat experience was lacking, his will to fight did not lose to anyone. After his friend of many years, Billy, fell, he must support the sky for Holy Light Religion at all costs. However, at this time, Feng Yin withdrew his sword. "Enough, there's no need to continue this fight." As he spoke, he retreated backwards. His figure drifted erratically as he nimbly moved around the myriad of karmic threads controlled by Harrington. It was as if he was dancing on the tip of a needle, nimble and swift. In the blink of an eye, he had returned to the camp of the 9 Regions cultivators. Harrington of Harrington's words. "Harrington," Feng Yin said, Feng, Holy Light, Feng, Sect, Lu, Feng, Feng. Feng Yin smiled and said, "Do you remember the conditions of our initial fight? If we win all 3 battles, please promise us 2 conditions. First, open the Golden King's treasure house and let us find what we want." Harrington coldly said, "Yes, but the future that I foresee is that you will be defeated in 2 battles and repent for thousands of years under the purification of the Holy Light." Feng Yin's smile became brighter. "Since you're so good at foreseeing the future, have you ever foreseen that we have already got what we want?" While speaking, he suddenly stretched out his right hand and opened his palm. A simple and unadorned block like a seal appeared in the palm of his hand. Seeing that block, Harrington slightly frowned because he could not see through it. He just faintly felt that this block seemed to be inextricably linked to the Golden King's treasure house. "This is the purpose of our 9 Regions cultivators coming to the Western continent." Harrington's brows wrinkled even tighter. He secretly launched his great prophecy technique. His eyes penetrated through the river of time and cause and effect. Following the block in Feng Yin's hand, he soon saw a group of young 9 Regions cultivators. Holding the block, they quietly crossed the battlefield under the cover of an elder-level cultivator. Taking advantage of the fierce battle in the sky, they sneaked into the camp of 9 Regions people from the ruins of Taobao City and sent the block to Feng Yin's hand with a spell. Looking back, Harrington was shocked to see that those young 9 Regions cultivators actually came out from the Golden King's treasure house. And the one who led them was impressively the culprit who stirred up trouble in Bretonia, the legendary gigolo of the Night King. He was also the primary target of Faceless One, Paul, Ferdinand, and the others. At this moment, his appearance meant that the operation of Faceless One and the others had failed, and those who participated in the hunt might have fallen. What was even more fatal was that, while those 9 Regions cultivators got rid of Faceless One and the others, they also got the key of 9 Regions people from the treasure house. This meant that, while putting away the key of the group of immortal tombs, Feng Yin lightly said, "The meaning of our victory no longer exists. Even if we win all 3 battles, you can't get the second key of the group of immortal tombs. Not to mention, I'm afraid the Golden King's treasure house is not under your control, so what's the point of gambling?" Harrington was silent, but his grip on the scepter tightened. Did the 9 Regions people want to just leave like that? After causing the fall of 3 Holy Ones of Holy Light Religion, including the Pope himself, and destroying the King's treasure house, the biggest strategic foundation of Holy Light Religion in the past 100 years, they just want to pat their butts and leave? Calm down, it's not good for anyone to continue fighting. Feng Yin advised, your noble religion's vitality has been damaged, so the most urgent thing is to recuperate and lick the wound. If you insist on forcing the war, perhaps we will suffer losses, but your noble religion's loss will be incalculable, and the 10,000 years old religion will fall apart and cease to exist. In your dreams. Feng Yin said, no, this is the calculated future. With that, he gently waved his hand, and a flying sword flew out like lightning. Harrington ignored this. He had the holy robe left by the Pope, so his defensive ability was quite strong. This kind of understated attack was simply not enough. Puff! A muffled sound of metal penetrating flesh was heard. Harrington felt a chill on his chest. When he looked down, he saw that Feng Yin's flying sword had penetrated his chest, leaving only the hilt and a small part of the sword stuck in his chest. The sword was engraved with a simple and unadorned 9 regions character, which seemed to be a prop used by the other party to cast the Great Change technique. However, this prop-like sword could directly penetrate the defense of the holy robe, trampling all the defensive principles and power under its feet, causing a fatal result. It was as if the heaven was destined to make it drink blood, like a karmic attack. In amazement, Harrington's body has involuntarily turned into holy light. This was the spontaneous activation of the resurrection ability of a Holy One. A moment later, the light gathered again, and his body also returned to its original state. The long sword in his chest disappeared, the wound healed, and even the broken holy robe was repaired. However, the cold pain in his chest still remained, reminding him of what had just happened. The coldness and the pain was like a freeze that made him unable to move. Okay, let's go. Feng Yin said and beckoned the 9 regions cultivators who were watching the battle to leave. Although the cultivators were somewhat inexplicable and couldn't see what had happened, Feng Yin's Star River overflowing sword and karmic piercing flying sword had successfully shocked the audience, making them involuntarily obey his orders. When the 9 regions people left, the Holy Light religion was in an uproar. Several archbishops couldn't help but want to fly out to stop them, but they found that there seemed to be an invisible barrier in front of them. No matter what, they couldn't go forward. That's enough, go back. Harrington's weak voice came from the sky, and then he slowly landed. His face was full of vicissitudes, and his eyebrows seemed to have aged a lot. Why? An archbishop could not restrain himself and asked, let them go just like that? Where would the face of our holy light religion be? How could we? Harrington's voice became stern. In the next 50 years or even 100 years, we must recuperate and must not lightly start a war. Do you think we only have one opponent, the 9 regions cultivators? Countless people in the continent are looking forward to the destruction of holy light religion. Otherwise, how could these 9 regions cultivators come here? At this time, acting on impulse is irresponsible to the thousands of years of foundation of holy light religion and the sea of holy light. The stern reprimand barely suppressed people's doubts. However, perhaps only Harrington himself knew that the reason why he didn't dare to go forward to kill them was because the other party's last sword had completely shattered his fighting spirit. The flying sword didn't look impressive, and the flying sword itself didn't have much power. However, it pierced through time and space, arriving in front of him through the karmic threads. This method didn't require any complicated techniques, and it wasn't as brilliant and all-encompassing as the Great Prophecy technique. However, it was extremely sharp, and one sword could break through all techniques. Even if he understood it, he was powerless to stop it. Perhaps if Billy the Third was here, he could suppress the opponent with fair and square strength. However, for Harrington, who was accustomed to relying on prophecy technique, Feng Yin was simply the perfect opponent to restrain him. Feng Yin could kill him once, so he could kill him a second time. If they continued to fight, it was really unnecessary. It would simply be throwing away one's life in vain. Looking at the back of the 9 regions cultivators that were constantly going away, Harrington's heart was like dead ashes, and his holy light was dim. On the other side, the 9 regions people who returned to the capital were talking about it. The mystery of Feng Yin's last sword strike was only known to the two parties involved. In other people's view, the beginning and the end of the fight were somewhat inexplicable. However, one thing was clear. Their purpose of crossing the endless sea to the west had been achieved. The key to open the group of immortal tombs had been taken by Feng Yin Daoist master. And the person who really achieved this goal was Wang Lu, but at this time, he was in a delicate predicament. Wang Lu, I think it's time for us to say goodbye. Aya faintly smiled. In her green eyes, there was a complex mixture of heroic spirit and tenderness. Chapter 360. The 9 regions cultivators who returned from the Holy City in triumph never stopped talking about it along the way. Although the 2 battles at the foot of the Holy City did not last long, they were thrilling and soul-stirring. Supreme Tian Yu's Unity Stage super powerful spell, the Pope's power to summon the Sea of Holy Light, the new Pope's Great Prophecy technique to reverse the cause and effect, as well as Feng Yin Daoist Master's Superior Stellar Diffraction technique. This was a wonderful battle that had not been seen in 9 regions for many years, which left people with endless aftertaste. The changes outside of the battle were also unexpected. How did Feng Yin Daoist Master get the key to the group of immortal tombs? Why did the king's treasure house of Holy Light religion suddenly disappear? Why did Feng Yin Daoist Master not pursue the victory? There were many mysteries in the hearts of the spectators, but unfortunately, the people who knew the inside story did not reveal even a little bit of it. Feng Yin has always been low-key, but even that mad dog Tian Yu was rarely silent. No one knew if it was because he was seriously injured or because of other reasons. In addition to Feng Yin and Tian Yu, the most eye-catching person in the team was the lead disciple of Lingjian's school, Wang Lu. Because some people in the team with discerning eyes saw that when the battle was in full swing, they were escorted by the 5th elder of Lingjian's school from the direction of Taobao City. How did they enter the interior of Taobao City? Since the mad dog Tian Yu caused an all-out war between the 2 forces, Holy Light religion blocked Taobao City, making it very difficult for outsiders to enter, especially the cultivators of 9 regions. Moreover, according to a few people, the key in the hands of Feng Yin Daoist Master was provided by Wang Lu and the others. In other words, Wang Lu got the key one step earlier than anyone else present, which was even more puzzling. However, as the person involved, Wang Lu had no time to enjoy the feeling of being in the limelight. In front of him, Aya had already said her farewell words, and it seemed that their parting was just around the corner. All good things must come to an end. This is a sentence that I learned after crossing the 9 regions. I think this is probably the time. What you have to do in the Western continent is over, so you should soon return to 9 regions, and I will not be with you. Wang Lu opened his mouth to persuade her, but Aya was one step ahead of him. Thank you for everything you've done for me, but I can't go on with you. My home is here, on this land. I can't leave my country and people behind. Although Wang Lu had expected this day as early as a few months ago, even before he set off from Spirit Sword Mountain, listening to Aya's words at this time, he still couldn't help but have a complicated mood. You can't abandon your country and people, but can you abandon your kitchen and your repeat customers? Aya bowed her head and smiled. I'm right here. You are welcome to come to Bretonia at any time. As long as it's you, no matter how many times, I'm willing to cook for you, although I know very well that my cooking is not good. Seeing that Aya had made up her mind to leave, Wang Lu had no choice but to reveal his trump card. Do you remember the bet you made with me in the treasury? In the fight against the barbarian race god of war, I said that if I could single-handedly delay the time, you would. Aya, of course, remembered that if Wang Lu could do it, she would agree to his request. At that time, although the bet was not formal, she still treated it seriously and never thought of reneging on the debt. It was just that Wang Lu didn't put forward any conditions at that time, so the matter was put down. When Wang Lu brought it up this time, it actually put her in a difficult position. Rest assured, I won't deliberately embarrass you, Wang Lu said, and then turned to look for his master. Master, I have something to do here. You take Lioli and Little White back first. Aya and I will stay in the western continent for a while. Wang Wu was a bit surprised. She looked at the two of them and said, "Not bad, are you going on a honeymoon?" Just as Wang Lu was about to clarify the misunderstanding, his master took out a medicine bag from her mustard seed bag and earnestly handed it to Wang Lu. "Disciple, Aya is a hard person. When you two are together, you have to take care of her and make her happy. This medicine is carefully mixed by me. No, I got it by chance. I don't have any use for it, so I give it to you. Remember to take the powder orally and apply the ointment externally." Wang Lu was inexplicably surprised. "Master, why did you come to the western continent this time? Could it be that you fancy some of the black and white uncles here with big tools and a large number of people? Moreover, even this can't satisfy you. Why did you bring medicine to liven things up?" His master put on a "how can you wrongly accuse me" expression. "You're too sad. We've been together for 10 years, yet you still don't understand your master. Everything master does is for your own good. You see, this medicine bag has your name written on it." Wang Lu turned it over and saw that it was indeed so, which made him even angrier. "Just you wait, it's not like I don't know your name." While the two of them were quarreling, I pushed him away. "No need, I want to be alone." Before she could finish her words, Wang Lu took the initiative to put his arm around her shoulder. "Haha, why are we being so polite? I'm your face." Before she could finish, she realized that things were going to be bad. Sure enough, she heard her master's sinister smile behind her. "Face what? Don't tell me it's the face." Wang Lu said, "There are so many words that start with face. Bread, flour, face the wall, how could you think of the face first?" Wang Lu righteously explained, "I'm her interviewer, please show some respect." Interview what?" Wang Lu turned serious. Not only to his master, but also to Aya, he said, "It's about whether Aya is qualified to be the king of Bretonia or not." After bidding farewell to his master and the others, Wang Lu and Aya traveled alone on the road to Bretonia. Although there were too many things to report to the sect elders, when Wang Lu applied, his master and the sect leader very generously granted him a leave of absence. They also told him to pay attention to safety and be careful, and then kicked him away, completely letting him go. However, Wang Lu also knew that his trip to the western continent had indeed come to an end. The next thing to do was to clean up the mess, which was to solve Aya's problem. Solving Aya's problem was not only for himself, but also for the sect. Before leaving, his master and the sect leader respectively looked for him to talk. Feng Yin Daoist master fully embodied the art of leadership. He said, "Wang Lu, you are the lead disciple of Lingjian school. I've always been at ease with what you do. However, this time, we have to respect her personal wishes, understand?" Wang Lu made a gesture of understanding. "Adultery but not rape, I understand." After a while, his master came over and righteously said, "Aya has been an inseparable member of Lingjian school since ancient times. Speak like a human being. Don't come back alone, understand?" Wang Lu said, I know what you mean, it's best if the three of us come back together, right?" His master smiled. "Women, once they are pregnant, they will not be so stupid and stubborn. Unfortunately, she's a spirit of the brave departed, how could she be pregnant?" His master's smile became thicker. "Otherwise, what do you think my medicine is for? You're still young, yet you've already succeeded in cultivating non-phase method. Can you really be dispirited?" His master patted Wang Lu's shoulder. "Young man, do a good job, I look forward to your good news." Good news? How could it be that easy? Aya's problem was not difficult, but it was not simple either. The two of them walked for a long time in silence. Wang Lu thought for a moment and then decided to ask, "What exactly happened? Do you remember in the king's treasure house, before we climbed the beautiful unique pool peak, we experienced a test?" Wang Lu, of course, remembered. In the legend, he was the only one who passed the test in the past tens of thousands of years. In the illusion, someone would propose an irresistible transaction or request. At that time, he faced Faceless One, and Aya. Who would she face? What, did you meet your old lover? Aya froze for a moment and then couldn't help but laugh. Old lover? The person I saw was you. Wang Lu was surprised. How could it be me? In the illusion, the situation was both real and fake. Although it was an illusion, the transaction proposed by the other party was indeed feasible. Otherwise, everyone knew that it was fake, so naturally, everyone could refuse the transaction and calmly pass the test. However, at that time, Wang Lu was clearly in an independent space, so how could there be a doppelganger next to Aya? Of course it's a fake person. Aya said, but what he said at that time, I don't think it's a lie. What did he say? He said that he can help me achieve the revival of Bretonia, can help me solve the problem that I once troubled, and achieve the prosperity of the Night Path. Wang Lu nodded. Almost every sentence went straight to the G-spot. No matter how you look at it, it's me. What about his conditions? He wants me to give up the throne and return to 9 regions with him. Wang Lu was suddenly surprised and then fell into silence. Aya said, at first, I thought he was just an illusion, but soon I realized that although he is not your real body, he is no different from you. What he said is indeed what you think in your heart, are you so sure? Aya lightly said, no one should be able to imitate your characteristics. If someone can imitate it, it must be you. And then? Then, I asked him why he made such a request, but he didn't answer me. He only asked me if I agreed or not. It was really hard for me to make a decision. Until the illusion was finally broken, I couldn't give him an answer. Now that I think about it, it's really indecisiveness that shames the night spirit. Wang Lu asked, so now you have an answer? Actually, I'm really curious. With such a good condition, why are you hesitating? Just quickly agree. Aya said, the condition is indeed very good, but if you want me to leave Bretonia, my duty, my mission, and go back to 9 regions with you to live a carefree life, I can't do it. You don't believe that I can fulfill my promise? If it was a few months ago, I might hesitate. But now, I have no doubt that you can do anything. In fact, you have done it. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled. Then, he carefully looked at Aya and was surprised to find that her spirit of the brave departed seemed to have changed a lot, which meant, yes, I have completed the oath to find the way to win the war. The recovery of Bretonia has basically been established before I left Dragon City. Aya clenched her fists as if she was feeling the power in her body. Now, although I still can't be called a living person, I don't have to worry about my spirit failing and vanishing. Congratulations. Everything is thanks to you. Before I came here, I couldn't believe that I could really do this. Aya said, the light in her eyes became more and more firm. But because of this, I can no longer safely continue to rely on your strength and sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. Right now, I have no reason to slack off. Next, I must shoulder my own mission and fulfill my duties as a king. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was stunned for a long time. He sincerely admired Aya's invincible logic. Then, he subconsciously put his hand into his mustard seed bag and touched the elixir that his master gave him before he left. Sometimes, it was more convenient to use medicine. Chapter 361. Do you remember the bet we made in the king's treasure house? In the silence, Wang Lu fumbled with his mustard seed bag and asked Aya. Aya was stunned. Of course, she remembered that bet. When they fought against the military god Tanu, Wang Lu once said that he could delay the enemy's army with his own strength and win the construction time for the laborers he recruited. Then, the two of them made a bet. If Wang Lu could do it, Aya would promise him one thing. It was just that, at that time, Wang Lu didn't mention it, so she put it down. Now that it was mentioned, Aya suddenly felt embarrassed. Chivalry required her to keep her promise, but if she gave up her insistence because of such a reason, it would be too ridiculous. Fortunately, Wang Lu didn't intend to be so rude and direct. If the bet is still valid, I hope you can come with me to walk around Bretonia in plain clothes. Just consider it as an unforgettable memory for my trip to the Western continent. Aya was startled. She really didn't expect that Wang Lu would put forward such a request. Although she knew that he must have some ulterior motive behind it, when she remembered what he had done for her these past few days, this simple request was really hard for her to refuse. Very well, as long as you don't mind this tour guide who hasn't been back for more than 100 years and can't keep up with the changes, that's good. Aya softly smiled. Thinking that in the future, she would have to part with Wang Lu, she was a bit disappointed. Wang Lu said, "Rest assured, even if you don't come back for 1,000 or 10,000 years, some things will not change. This time, it won't take up too much of your time. How about a month?" "Of course, as long as you say it, even a year is fine." Wang Lu softly said to himself, "It's just a drug, how could it take that long?" In fact, Aya was anxious to return. Being directly sent from Dragon City to the king's treasure house by Wang Lu, she was a bit dissatisfied. At that time, Bretonia had just won 2 crucial battles, which almost uprooted the local influence of Holy Light religion. The next step was to consolidate the results of the war and stabilize the political power. And as the daughter of the king of Bretonia, her role was irreplaceable. Even though for more than 100 years, the people with real political influence in Bretonia were Bedivere and many other nobles, the reputation of the Night King was still like the sun in the sky, never declining. Her appeal could speed up the process of the restoration of Bretonia, but Wang Lu just had to do it at this time. His intention was to make her give up the throne and return to the 9 regions with him. However, this was the only thing that she could not give in to. Although Aya had experienced too many ups and downs in her life, she could not give up her mission as a ruler. However, if it was Wang Lu, and if it was only for a month, then let him be. The woman thought as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. The first stop of the trip was a remote mountain area, because Wang Lu said that he had seen enough of the prosperity of the big city. The scenery in the remote areas of Bretonia was actually nothing to write home about. The two of them walked in the mountains for half a day and then stopped in a village. Even in this remote small village, the great changes in Bretonia had already been reflected, and a vigorous vitality ran through it. The two of them stayed in a simple inn in the village and received very warm hospitality. According to the villagers, these past few days, the village was indeed as happy as a festival. Because a lord who once relied on the power of the church to act like a tyrant in the nearby area was not long ago beheaded by a knight from Dragon City, the dark cloud that had been hovering above people's head for many years was suddenly swept away. This matter aroused Aya's interest. After asking about it in detail, she learned that the knight who beheaded the lord was one of Bedivere's Dragon City guards, and also the new local lord. Thereupon, with the consent of Wang Lu, the two of them went to the city where the lord was located. When they arrived at the city, it was a different scene. The change of power from the old to the new was particularly obvious here. There were many traces of war in the city. Half of the most luxurious castle was destroyed, and the church next to the castle was also cut off. Obviously, the lord and the church here had resisted. In addition, the original lord's forces were purged, and many shops and workshops were destroyed or seized. The most discussed topic in the city was the rise of Dragon City and the return of the Night King. Most of the people were happy to see this, and they were full of confidence for the future. The city was full of vigor. Moreover, the spirit of chivalry was even more sought after by many people. One could see many people dressed as knights walking on the streets, and some were genuine knights who followed the Dragon City guards on patrol. Of course, there were even more people who imitated them, and there were also many opportunists. But behind the chaos, it showed that the spirit of chivalry was unprecedentedly flourishing, which made Aya overjoyed. I knew it, Bretonia is the kingdom of knights, so the spirit of chivalry will shine everywhere. Wang Lu lightly smiled. Just like the holy light shining everywhere? Aya was so excited that she didn't hear the sarcasm behind this question. Instead, she seriously nodded. It will be more prosperous than the Holy Light religion in the past, it definitely will. Really? Since we've seen the bright side, let's see the dark side. Wang Lu said and then used a spell to confuse the mind of a patrolling soldier on the street. What did you do with the reactionaries? No, the church's people. The soldier replied in a daze. They were locked under the cathedral, where the Inquisition used to be. The church's people were used to judge heresy, and now it's their turn to be judged. That place can't hold too many people, right? What else? There are too many traitors of the church and its vassal churches that the underground Inquisition can't hold them all. Some are thrown into the city's prison, and many are simply killed. In any case, they've been corrupted, so they all have original sin. Original sin? Aya frowned, very dissatisfied with this explanation. Wang Lu asked, do you mean they used to bully people and do all kinds of evil? The confused soldier thought for a moment and then replied, some of them are. Although it's not clear whether they have done it or not, after all, they are the church's people, so it's not wrong to punish them. What kind of reason is that? It's ridiculous. It doesn't care about right and wrong. Aya was immediately angry, but Wang Lu stopped her. Why should we make things difficult for a soldier? Moreover, seeing is believing. Then, under the cover of spells, the two of them sneaked into the Inquisition under the cathedral. What they saw and heard made Aya's hair stand on end. Inside the Inquisition, there were countless instruments of torture. These were the proof of the Holy Light religion's rule in Bretonia. However, the knights who had replaced the Holy Light had picked up these cruel instruments of torture and used them on people one by one. Most of those being tortured were members of the church. There were bishops who held great power, and young priests. However, there was a considerable number of them who were obviously just ordinary believers. At this moment, they were cruelly nailed to the torture tools, drifting between life and death. What made Aya's hair stand on end was that some of the church's nuns were brutally abused here, and the process was unbearable. Aya's whole body trembled in anger, and then, with a swing of her sword, she beheaded several of the leaders. Blood and brains splashed all over the room. The nuns screamed incessantly, and the scene was in chaos. Wang Lu sarcastically smiled. Yo, the spirit of chivalry really shines in all directions. Aya didn't say a word, and her sword didn't return to its sheath. Wang Lu patted her on the shoulder. I'll handle the next thing, you don't have to show your face, your identity is sensitive. Aya gazed at Wang Lu for a long time, and then slowly nodded. Then, Wang Lu single-handedly swept away many guards, directly killed his way to the city lord's mansion, and then saw the new lord. And it just so happened that the lord also knew Wang Lu. The two of them had met several times in Dragon City. However, this time, there was no greeting. Wang Lu bluntly questioned what the Inquisitor had seen and heard, and the Lord was shocked to hear this. He explained that he had just gained a foothold here, and there were many things waiting to be done, so he didn't pay too much attention to the details below. And when the matter was investigated further, he explained with a bitter smile that when he parachuted here, there were too few people at his disposal. At present, most of the people used to maintain the order of the city were still the same people, good and bad. When there was a change of regime, people's hearts were unstable, and it was inevitable that extreme events would occur. However, he promised that he would strengthen the management, and there would never be such a crazy case again. Wang Lu smiled without saying a word, and Aya, who was hiding behind the scenes, reluctantly accepted this explanation, and the matter could be considered to have been settled. Then, they stayed in the city for a full half a month, using Wang Lu's illusion and Aya's legendary power to perfectly hide their tracks, as if they were hiding in the city. During this period, they carefully observed the changes in the city. The new lord did not go back on his word. After that day, he comprehensively strengthened the management of the city, and several people who took the lead in breaking the law were publicly beheaded as a warning to others. However, the situation did not substantially improve. The exclusion and oppression of the remnants of the Holy Light religion was still shocking. Many of the church's legal property was plundered, and the people close to the church were subjected to unbearable bullying. Injuries occurred from time to time. Although the new lord repeatedly ordered them to restrain themselves, they were obviously unwilling. Aya's initial anger, dissatisfaction, and injustice gradually turned into doubt. How did things become like this? The new lord was not an evil person. On the contrary, after taking office, he worked day and night, but many things still quickly deviated from the development track, which made Aya very confused. Hearing that she was finally willing to ask modestly, Wang Lu earnestly explained to her, the change of regime is inevitably accompanied by the redistribution of resources. But it shouldn't be so unreasonable, it's like plundering. Reason? Whose reason? Aya sternly said, in the spirit of chivalry, justice is the basic creed. Wang Lu said, that's the spirit of chivalry, not the objective existence of the human heart. Right now, the suppression and even persecution of the Holy Light religion, the insatiable greed in the redistribution of benefits, are not the case of one or two people, but the driving force of a group. Aya said, yes, the objective existence of the human heart is far from perfect, but the value of the spirit of chivalry lies in that it can infect others, turning the illusory spirit into a real human heart. 100 years ago, when I fought in all directions, I did not leave behind such a mess. Are you blaming the poor new lord for not being as capable as you? Aya was speechless. Of course, she couldn't ask everyone to be able to do what she did. Moreover, even you yourself are not omnipotent. Don't forget, more than 100 years ago, the ancestors of these greedy and ignorant civilians were infected by your spirit of chivalry. Aya sneered. Your sophistry. Yes, this is sophistry, but the truth is a good truth. There are 3 great illusions in the world: I can kill, she is interested in me, and I can change people's heart. And you have made the 3rd mistake. Chapter 362. Aya obviously has her own idea on how to change people's mind. Was it wrong to change people's mind? If so, then why did the world need to be enlightened? Wouldn't it be fine if they just let it be? However, let alone the Western continent, even in 9 regions, the king's way of enlightenment was an indispensable part of any ruler. Wasn't it natural to infect and enlighten people with the spirit of chivalry? However, she was not ready to debate with Wang Lu, because it was impossible for her to win, and even if she did, it would be meaningless. However, Wang Lu didn't say much. Some things were far more powerful to see with one's eyes than to say with one's mouth. This small city could not accommodate the weight of people's mind, so the next stop was Dragon City. Choosing Dragon City meant that their 1-month journey would finally come to an end. At this time, when Aya thought about it, she was both reluctant and relieved. She had already faintly understood what Wang Lu wanted to do. However, she believed that after arriving at Dragon City, the real knight of Bretonia would let him understand that the spirit of chivalry was not illusory. She believed that the former knight of the Round Table, Bedivere, would not let her down. However, after arriving at Dragon City, what she saw and heard made her feel as if she had fallen into an ice cave. Everything seemed to be a replica of that remote town. Only, the scale of things was bigger, and on the surface, it seemed to be more orderly. However, greedy people were still greedy, and decaying people were still decaying. The past order was broken, and the newly established order was clothed with the spirit of chivalry. However, what they did was not much different from Holy Light religion. In the past, the church suppressed all 4 sides of Bretonia, and the believers were a cut above the rest. Now, the ones who were a cut above the rest were the knights. Not long after the regime was restored, a strict class barrier was vaguely formed. There was a clear boundary between the knight class and the civilian class, and the knights were also divided into different levels. Different levels meant different benefits. High-level knights occupied the richest land, had hordes of servants, and had monstrous power. They were like overlords of a region. To some extent, the new Bretonia was better than the Holy Light religion's rule. However, in some ways, the situation was actually worse. Because in order to consolidate the regime, Holy Light religion took out the resources of other parishes to subsidize Bretonia. However, many of the newly appointed knights simply began to exploit them. The replacement of the old regime and the new redistribution of interests were inevitable. However, everything should be fair and just, which was beneficial to the country. In the past, Aya fought everywhere and did everything she could to maintain the fairness of this process. She had once generously released an opponent who posed a great threat to her, but was defeated in the end, and gave him the respect he deserved. She had once severely punished those subordinates who tried to show off their strength after a victory and wantonly plunder. She had even set an example for them. Even though she was a supreme king, she still maintained a simple life. The night spirit allowed her to be like a spark that set the prairie ablaze, quickly setting off a storm in Bretonia and establishing an unprecedented unified regime. Although for various reasons, the Knight's kingdom fell apart shortly after it was established, she believed that the future of Bretonia had been found. At least, she and the people who accompanied her in the struggle should be very clear about this point. Why? Late at night, Aya quietly entered Bedivere's study room. The master of Dragon City, who had just finished his day's work, also the current regent of Bretonia, was startled and immediately stood up from his desk. Aya? Aya did not reveal herself, but asked in a cold voice, why? She didn't say a word, but Bedivere was very clear about where Aya's anger came from. Just now, he ended his meeting with a famous rich man in Bretonia, who promised to give him a piece of land that was once controlled by Holy Light religion, along with the people on that land. Compared to Holy Light religion, that greedy and brutal rich man would only worsen the life of the people on that land. There were many similar things. Bedivere didn't know how much Aya had seen, but he didn't intend to cover it up. After a long silence, Bedivere finally said, "Because these are necessary compromises." Compromises? Aya's voice was full of loss and puzzlement. You shouldn't be a person who easily says the word compromise. Bedivere self-deprecatingly said, isn't it? A person who has been struggling at death's door for more than 100 years under the monstrous arrogance of the church, I'm afraid he's best at compromise. Otherwise, I would have followed the late king more than 100 years ago. This time, it was Aya's turn to be silent. The spirit of chivalry requires me to stubbornly resist until the last moment, but in the end, I couldn't bear to see everything of the late king vanish into thin air. Therefore, I compromised. Moreover, I continuously compromised. I surrendered to the opponent that I shouldn't surrender to, fell in love with the woman that I shouldn't fall in love with, and gave birth to the child that I shouldn't have. Today, compromise seems to have become my instinct. Bedivere was filled with emotion. However, the next moment, he changed the subject and unexpectedly took a tough stance. But in these more than 100 years, it also made me realize that compromise is an indispensable quality for a politician. Without my compromise, there would be no Dragon City today, and there would be no Bretonia today. Aya, you are the daughter of the Night King, tell me, is my compromise wrong? Aya's voice was somewhat astringent. That was then, but now, Bedivere shook his head. It's the same, it's actually the same. Just now, although the rich man you saw is tyrannical and greedy, he has powerful influence and strength. The winter-cold city could be occupied without shedding a single drop of blood, and that's because of him. What he wanted was just a small piece of land and a few hundred laborers, but what he exchanged for was the lives of thousands of soldiers. So, what can I do? For the sake of my own scrupulously abiding by the rules, should I let my soldiers risk their lives? Benevolence is also the basic creed of chivalry. Aya said, you should try to change him, to reform him. The human heart cannot be changed. Bedivere wearily said, unless we use a spell to turn everyone into a puppet, we must admit that the human heart is not as good as we think. Aya was surprised that Bedivere would say something similar to Wang Lu's. For a time, she didn't know what to say. After a long time, Aya tried to say, that's just because we're not strong enough. Bedivere was excited. Not strong enough? Yes, I'm just an ordinary knight of the Round Table, so I'm indeed not strong enough. But, isn't your father, the Night King, powerful enough? In his life, he never compromised, but what was the result? Was it because of the Holy Light religion's infiltration that people deserted you? How can you say that? Aya was unprecedentedly angry. Do you want to say that our scrupulous abiding by the rules are in vain? Bedivere deeply looked at her, and then dejectedly said, of course, it's not in vain. Without the Night King's struggle, Bretonia would still be in a state of disunity, with endless infighting and being bullied. But these are two completely different things. The strength of a country lies in the strength of the people's heart. The people's heart is broken, shameless, and insatiable. However, before Aya could finish, Wang Lu patted her on the shoulder. Enough, don't be hysterical like a literary and artistic young man. Aya glared at Wang Lu. Her legendary level pressure assaulted his face. Wang Lu's figure slightly swayed, but he didn't budge an inch. What, are you going to wield your sword at me? Just like what you've done to the people around you? In a split second, Aya's anger congealed, and a bone-chilling chill spread all over her body. No, let's go back and talk. With that, Wang Lu pushed Aya and then turned around to leave. After the two of them left, Bedivere stood alone in his study. After a long time, he deeply bent down toward the direction where Aya went. Farewell, my king. You're wrong about one thing. On the way back, Wang Lu said to Aya, he is no longer your subordinate. In the more than 100 years of your absence, he is the pillar that truly supports the knight spirit in Bretonia. He is the one who single-handedly controls the situation in Bretonia and reunited the country from division to division in just a few months. And you're just the daughter of the Night King. What qualification do you have to criticize him in front of him? Don't you understand the principle of respecting the old and cherishing the young? Aya didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She was speechless. Perhaps, as she said, the changes in the past 100 years were somewhat difficult for her to adapt. Perhaps Bedivere has found his way, and perhaps there is a reason for his approach, but that has deviated from the knight spirit. Wang Lu said, of course, because he is no longer a knight under your command, but a ruler. And as a ruler, he is far more qualified than you. At least, in Bretonia, although the knight spirit has been distorted, inspired by this slogan, the people's heart is indeed united, the country is indeed revived, and unprecedented prosperity is in the near future. At the same time, it will also be accompanied by unprecedented decay. That's the norm. Wang Lu said, there are black and white in people's heart. Even the most heinous people often have a flash of humanity. Saints will also have unbearable selfishness in their heart. Complex people form a complex society. This is an objective reality and law, like the sunrise and sunset. Don't be so obsessed with cleanliness. Aya thought for a long time. It could be seen that the confusion in her heart was like a knot. Perhaps that's just because I'm not strong enough. Wang Lu was about to cry because of her stupidity. Then how strong is strong? According to the legend of the Western continent, in the era when gods walked the world, are those gods considered strong? But I've never heard of anyone who could enlighten the people and make everyone become an immortal. So, do you have to break through the legendary level, become a god, and then from the god world to the holy world, and then from the holy world to the supreme world, only then can you come back to deal with the problem of the people's heart? Aya was somewhat confused. What are your so-called holy world and supreme world? Oh, that's the content of the expansion pack. It's too early to tell you now. But in short, don't you think it's absurd that you have to be infinitely powerful to do something like that? Aya was even more confused. So, all these years, I've been doing useless work? How could it be useless? Without you, there would be no Bretonia today, but today's Bretonia doesn't need you. Wang Lu smiled. I know you don't understand, so I will seriously explain it to you. Actually, the reason is very simple. It's just that before, you wouldn't listen, but now. Aya earnestly asked, please give me your advice. Chapter 363. Faced with Aya's sincere inquiry, Wang Lu rarely put down his usual calm expression and instead became somewhat embarrassed. In fact, it's not like I can give you pointers. I have never been omniscient and omnipotent, but it just so happens that your situation. I have personally witnessed a similar situation, so I can use it as a reference. What I say may not be right, but it should have some reference value. Aya listened carefully. Wang Lu said, right now, Bretonia does not need you. The reason is the same as when your kingdom fell apart. A country's society is a complicated whole, composed of many different people and different classes. As a ruler, you can't directly influence every single person. You have led troops to war, so you should know that no matter how wonderful a strategy is, it can only be implemented through subtle tactics. In war, it is the officers who carry out your intentions, but in governing a country, it is the bureaucrats who carry out your intentions. What you really need to face is not every person in Bretonia, but the bureaucrats closest to your class. Aya could not help but retort, people should not have such a clear distinction between superior and inferior. Wang Lu said, I know that you are the founder of the Knights of the Round Table system, and you have always advocated equality. But even in the heyday of the Knights of the Round Table, how many people were there? There are tens of thousands of qualified knights in Bretonia. How big of a table do you have to put all of them down? In the end, you only have direct contact with the 100 or so people in front of the round table. They are your right-hand men to rule this country, but you don't care about their interests. The human heart pursues benefits. The knights follow you because of their faith, but they are not gods. They cannot live by faith alone. They also have to live and enjoy. In addition, as professionals, they needed a huge amount of resources to make themselves stronger. This was the instinct of being human. Of course, I know that you are a king with an almost perfect personality, but you can't ask everyone to be like you, otherwise, there would be nothing to eat in this world. It was rare for Aya not to respond to this burden, but to silently and earnestly listen. Wang Lu continued, the knights follow you because they hope to get benefits from following you. They are eager for honor, eager to make contributions, and at the same time, eager to be treated in accordance with their achievements. Aya interrupted, I have never obstructed them from pursuing appropriate benefits, and I have never demanded that they lead an ascetic life. Yes, you didn't force it, so your regime can persist until the first unification of Bretonia. Otherwise, you can't even pull up the most basic troops. Wang Lu said, your problem is that you didn't set an example. You are the Night King, the king who stands at the peak of billions of people. If you live a poor life, what do you want the people below you to do? You, as the king, get 1,000 silver coins a month. Can those ministers get 10,000 a month? They could only grit their teeth and take out 800, 500. But it's not even enough to live. Aya laughed. Do you want me to be extravagant because of this? Wang Lu said, apart from a few exceptions, have you ever seen a ruler who is not extravagant? Those poor monarchs were either overthrown by their subordinates, or they were about to become the monarchs of a subjugated kingdom. Poor monarchs meant that the entire bureaucratic system had gone haywire. So, according to your inference, there is no virtuous king in this world? Wang Lu said, to be precise, virtuous people are not suitable to be monarchs, because the concept of morality is not applicable to different classes. At the same time, the spirit of chivalry is not suitable to guide the monarch to rule the country. Aya had actually been moved by Wang Lu a lot, but when she heard him mention the spirit of chivalry, the girl was immediately dissatisfied. Do you want to reject the spirit of chivalry? Not reject, but put the spirit of chivalry in the right position. If something is in the wrong position, even if it has no defects, it will only have the opposite effect. Just like when you make a fish head pancake to look up at the starry sky, that is a naked tragedy. Using such an example to illustrate, Aya found it slightly easier to accept. So, where do you think the position of the spirit of chivalry should be? Wang Lu said, "It's very simple, put it on the altar." The spirit of chivalry emphasizes fairness, dedication, bravery, and so on. These are all good qualities, and when it comes to educating and guiding people, it is nothing more than that. But idols are idols, and reality is reality. Aya said, "Do you mean to deceive everyone? You say fair and just on the mouth, but in fact, you are selfish and insatiable? Deceive?" Wang Lu smiled. "No promise is not deceiving. As long as you don't claim that the spirit of chivalry has been fully popularized in Bretonia, and the people can use the spirit of chivalry to strictly demand all the ruling classes, it is not deceiving. It should be said that the spirit of chivalry does not exist in reality, and has already been realized. It is a goal that we need to constantly strive for. Isn't that enough to explain it? In fact, we are indeed working hard for it. Although the reality is still far from the ideal, a unified Bretonia is always closer to the ideal than a Bretonia that is exploited and broken down by the church, isn't it?" Seeing Aya was silent, Wang Lu added, using the military analogy that you are good at, let's say that you now encounter an enemy that you can't defeat. Do you want to directly rush forward and fight to the death, or do you want to step by step and accumulate advantages little by little until the final decisive battle? During this period, you may win or lose, and compromise and retreat are inevitable. Aya somewhat tiredly asked, "But, how long will it take to truly realize the prosperity of the spirit of chivalry?" Wang Lu rhetorically asked, "If I say 10 years is enough, will you believe it? I know you can't wait to see that day, but you have to clearly realize that you have already done what you can. You have created an unprecedented foundation for Bretonia, but your role will end here. Doing more is just pulling up seedlings to help them grow." Aya slightly nodded, as if she had accepted Wang Lu's suggestion. Wang Lu did not urge her and quietly accompanied her to walk in the alleys on the periphery of Dragon City. The hustle and bustle of the city was isolated by layers upon layers of high walls, creating a small tranquility. After an unknown amount of time, Aya somewhat sighed with relief and seemed to want to say something. However, at this time, a muffled cry suddenly sounded in front of them. Aya's eyes narrowed, and then her figure flickered. In a flash, she arrived at the source of the sound. Wang Lu sighed and quickly caught up with her. In a dilapidated house, he saw a young girl crying helplessly. The cause of the matter was very simple. They used to be merchants who provided Snow Mountain spring water to the church. Later, when the church was expelled, they suffered a calamity. His father and mother were judged as traitors who supported the church. Although their lives were not in danger, the family property that they had accumulated for decades was almost completely plundered. Under grief and indignation, the two made an extreme choice, leaving behind only a young daughter and a little bit of property that was barely enough for her to live. Unfortunately, the young woman was never familiar with the affairs of the world, and her parents' inheritance was quickly cheated out. Now, it was even difficult for her to survive. Wang Lu, is this kind of sin something that must be tolerated on the way forward? Wang Lu did not answer, because Aya actually did not need an answer. Wang Lu, I think there is always something I can do in this country. Perhaps, as you said, I am not suitable to be a king, but I am still a knight, and I can do what a knight should do. Wang Lu asked, single-handedly and chivalrously. Wandering in Bretonia, taking care of all the injustice in the world, beheading all the heartless and unjust people in the world? Relying on your identity as the Night King, or rather, the daughter of the Night King, to fight against the strict system? Aya, this is not the spirit of a knight, but a knight-errant who violates the law with martial arts. Once or twice is fine, but sooner or later, you will find that the sword in your hand is aimed at the huge country that you have established. And the knights who still have reverence for you will unknowingly stand on the opposite side of you. Do you really want to see that scene? Aya's whole body trembled and she was extremely unwilling. Do you want me to do nothing? You can do anything, as long as you can bear the consequences. From your point of view, this is the country that you have established, so you can do whatever you want to it. But I guess no matter what you do, you will not get a satisfactory result. Wang Lu helplessly said, "So, do you understand why most of the immortal cultivators in 9 regions are not too involved in the secular world? In 9 regions, there are very few cultivators above the King Pill stage who directly interfered with the affairs of the mortal world, because they couldn't afford to. The number of cultivators in 9 regions, relative to the mortal world, is already 1 in 10,000, or even less. The Wanxian League has created so many shitty things, so the mortal world could only be more chaotic by 10,000 times. A large part of the reason for the immortal cultivators to seek detachment is that the chaos of the mortal world is really unbearable. You see, I set up the wisdom sect, and although I am the sect leader, I am only remotely commanding it. The ones who are deeply involved in it are the several deputy sect leaders. Because the involvement is too deep, even I, a professional adventurer, would be in a mess." Aya didn't speak again. Wang Lu patted her on the shoulder and didn't say anything more. Aya was never a fool. When she became famous, she knew better than most people in the world what she wanted to do. In fact, Wang Lu didn't think that he was much better than Aya. His biggest advantage was detachment. Aya has been deeply immersed in Bretonia, unable to extricate herself. Otherwise, with her wide knowledge, she wouldn't need others to remind her about these things. And now, what should be said has been said. Next, he could only patiently wait for Aya to figure it out. Next, Wang Lu no longer stuck to Aya's side. Instead, he gave her enough time and space to think about it. Some things needed to be left alone. However, 3 days later, when Wang Lu finished his short trip and returned to the agreed inn with Aya, he found that Aya had disappeared. Standing at the door of the inn's bedroom, Wang Lu was stunned. Did she get abducted by human traffickers? With that, Wang Lu felt a burst of disappointment. He couldn't help but put down the travel souvenir in his hand, the honey wine that Aya loved to drink, which was added with a special elixir. This was the last resort that Wang Lu prepared for Aya. If this silly girl still couldn't figure it out, then he could only let her figure it out in other places. Unfortunately, things were really hard to predict. Perhaps Aya really belonged to the Western continent, so no matter what, he couldn't bring her back to 9 regions. Chapter 364. Traveling alone in the Western continent was not a happy journey. Wang Lu searched for 2 days in Dragon City, but he couldn't find any trace of Aya. The Night King seemed to have evaporated from the face of the earth, leaving no trace behind. Even with Wang Lu's strategic ability, he was helpless. Of course, considering that Aya now had legendary level power, if she deliberately wanted to hide, with Wang Lu's current strength, it was impossible for him to find her. Since he didn't want to meet her, then there was no need to force it. Wang Lu forced a smile to convince himself to accept the reality, and then silently embarked on his return journey. Because he didn't want to leave like a stray dog, Wang Lu didn't rush his journey. Along the way, he could also witness the changes in Bretonia and even the entire Western continent. Bedivere was a qualified ruler. His performance was so good that it even exceeded Wang Lu's expectation. Wang Lu had long calculated that the former Knight of the Round Table, who had been dormant for 100 years, was not simple. Therefore, after the overall situation was settled, he deliberately transferred Aya away, in order to let Bedivere have a reasonable chance of ascending to the throne, cutting off the possibility of Aya ascending to the throne. Bedivere's accomplishment was very beautiful. Not only did he successfully control the overall situation in Bretonia as the regent, but he also used Aya's prestige to consolidate his own authority. His method was so beautiful that if he didn't repent every night in front of the portrait of the Night King, Wang Lu would have suspected that he was the evil mastermind behind the scenes. Bedivere's loyalty to the Night King was beyond doubt. However, as a ruler, his enthusiasm for power was not trivial. In the past 100 years, he used various extraordinary methods to continue the inheritance of the Bretonia Dragon clan and the Night King. And this 100 years of special experience was enough to change anyone. What really made Wang Lu have a whole new level of respect for Bedivere was on the 5th day after Aya's disappearance. At that time, Wang Lu casually walked on the land of Bretonia and unknowingly came to Golden Flash Town. Not surprisingly, he didn't see Aya's trace. In fact, even if he could guess Aya's whereabouts, with Aya's current strength, she could detect his approach and then perfectly hide herself. Just to reminisce the past, Wang Lu still chose the century-old shop. He was surprised to find that the girl who previously served him, Nice, was still there. Wang Lu remembered that Nis was selected to join the Dragon City Guard along with him. When Nis saw Wang Lu, she was also very surprised. She explained that she was indeed in Dragon City, but recently, she saw some things in Dragon City, which made her realize that the life in Golden Flash Town was more suitable for her. She was a Dragon City Guard, and she also appeared in the 2 decisive battles. Although she was just a bystander, she also had some meritorious service. Guard Dragon City. Guard Dragon City. She also planned to leave on the same day. But because she stayed, Dragon City continent, but because she was, so she wanted to stay. She Dragon City Star City. He saw Aya, the radiant Aya that made it hard for people to look directly at her. The girl was bathed in the radiance, wearing a bright silver armor that did not lose its elegance, and holding a sword that symbolized the royal power of Bretonia, the stone sword. Her face was brimming with the majesty of a king. Wherever she went, people would worship her. In front of and behind Aya, there were hundreds of Dragon City guards neatly lined up. Seeing such Aya, Wang Lu was shocked like a stormy sea. Because he never thought that after being missing for several days, Aya actually chose to wallow in the mire with Bedivere. Otherwise, perhaps she could openly walk in the territory of Bretonia, but she shouldn't be able to mobilize the Dragon City guards around her. Could it be that she chose to cooperate with Bedivere? How could Bedivere unite? This kind of development was completely incomprehensible. But soon, Wang Lu found that there were too many doubtful points about this Aya. Although the appearance was exactly the same, and even the temperament was quite similar, but after being with Aya day and night, Wang Lu was always able to detect some differences. Especially when Aya swaggered around in Golden Flash Town and then stayed in the most luxurious inn, Wang Lu saw even more doubtful points. For example, Tisk, there's clearly something fishy about this breast size. The real one has a broad chest, okay? Moreover, if you look carefully, her height is a bit higher. She's already so old, and she's also a spirit of the brave departed. How could she possibly grow up? Moreover, how could the real Aya not have any reaction when he came within 200 steps of her? Finally, it was the belated former Archbishop Rowan who allowed Wang Lu to determine her identity. This former high-ranking member of the church, during the Battle of Dragon City, resolutely rebelled and was exposed as a member of the Priory of Zion, which finally allowed him to protect himself in the subsequent turmoil. However, he was barely able to protect himself, and no longer had his former glory. This time, he came here in a low-key manner, alone, and even the Dragon City guards ignored him. However, his appearance allowed Wang Lu to see through Aya's real situation. So that's how it is. There's no need for Faceless One to come forward. The Priory of Zion has already cooperated with Bedivere. For the Priory of Zion, this was a natural choice. Once the two cooperated, Joan of Arc, who was hidden by the Priory of Zion, would have a place to shine. The Aya before him was just a fake good, which greatly disappointed Wang Lu, but also made him admire Bedivere's means. With Joan of Arc, Aya's existence was irrelevant, because Bedivere's weakest link had been made up. As a former Knight of the Round Table, his identity was naturally weaker than Aya's. Even if Aya was just the daughter of the Night King, she was still more suitable than him to hold the political power. At the same time, his beloved woman was the church's holy woman, which also cast a shadow over his reputation. Therefore, Bedivere could at most serve as the regent, but the king's position was hard to reach. If Aya was determined to fight against him, it would also be troublesome. Therefore, he directly used Joan of Arc. Needless to say, this marionette was the prop that he put on the stage to establish his reputation. At the same time, it also put an end to Aya's idea of using her identity to fight against him. From a political point of view, although it was not very open and aboveboard, it was absolutely effective. As for the Caliban, it was difficult for Wang Lu to distinguish whether it was real or fake. However, most of it was fake, because the real Aya could not possibly abandon her sword. And with the current state of Bretonia, it could not do anything to the legendary level Aya. Seeing Joan of Arc, Wang Lu completely lost interest in Bretonia. This included Bedivere, a man who once impressed him with his loyalty, who was also swept into the category of not worthy of his attention. All those who were obsessed with power struggles were fools. This was Wang Lu's consistent understanding. And since this land had been controlled by fools, it was no longer worthy of his attention. As for Aya, he couldn't find her anywhere. It was clear that she didn't want to see him, so why should he force her? After a few decades, when Wang Lu had reached the King Pil Yuanying deity stage, he would revisit this place. At that time, even if he had to use force, he would make Aya take the pill. After bidding farewell to Nis and Golden Flash Town, Wang Lu no longer had any reluctance to leave. Alone, he went to the eastern part of the continent, ready to return to 9 regions. This journey took less than a week. When he arrived at the eastern part, the city master of Deep Earth City, Haddock, personally received him and arranged a special ship to send him across the endless sea. After asking in detail, Wang Lu learned that he had a very resounding reputation in the eastern city-states. It turned out that the story of him plotting to kill 2 legendary, 1 quasi-legendary, and 5 archbishops of the Holy Light religion in the king's treasure house had spread. Although there were too many coincidences, Wang Lu still became the hero of the eastern people. If not for Wang Lu's determination to leave, Sir Haddock intended to take Wang Lu on a 1-month tour of the eastern region. When he arrived at the dock, Wang Lu found that the eastern city-state's courteous reception for him, the hero, was absolutely sincere. Because there was a powerful warship covered with alchemy products and high-level arrays. Its value could not even be measured by currency units such as magic coins. Moreover, he was the only distinguished guest on this ship. At the door of the luxuriously decorated bedroom, 2 rows of beautiful and sexy maids were respectfully waiting for him. The expression on their faces was moving and wooden, as if they were waiting for his order or pleasure at any time. However, Wang Lu was not in the mood for pleasure. He walked straight past the maids, pushed open the bedroom door, and casually threw his luggage aside. Then, he was scared by the person behind the door and took 3 steps back. Aya. The person behind the door was Aya, wearing a simple but dignified dress. She sat upright at the desk in the middle of the bedroom with a gentle smile on her face. Wait a minute, you're not Aya, you're Jean d'Arc? From the subtle difference between the woman's eyebrows and the obviously different curve of her chest, Wang Lu recognized the other party's true identity. However, at this meeting, Wang Lu's mood was very bad, because the pleasant surprise that had just welled up in his heart was quickly replaced by a sense of loss. And between the ups and downs, he really could not find any pleasure. Bedivere, are you out of your mind? Isn't it good to be the king of Bretonia? Why do you have to provoke me? Believe it or not, I'll go back and use 3 months to make your regime collapse. For a cultivator who was not even a King Pill level cultivator to say such generous words, it was usually just a joke. However, if this joke was said by Wang Lu, perhaps Bedivere himself wouldn't be able to laugh. However, Jean actually smiled. I haven't seen you for a few days, you really don't recognize me? How could Wang Lu have a good face toward this kind of puppet? I don't look at the face, I only look at the chest. Why don't you show me your chest? The next moment, a cold aura filled the air, causing Wang Lu to tremble. Then, a thought flashed through his mind. F***ck me, dead chef, it's really you. I haven't seen you for a long time, so you went to get breast implants. The woman in front of him helplessly sighed. Think again. Wang Lu calmed down, carefully looked at the other party again, and then curiously asked, "Is this the fusion of your body and soul? Did you snatch Bedivere's trump card for your own use?" "It's mine, why would I snatch it?" Aya shook her head. "I just had an open and honest talk with him, and then made a deal." "Deal?" Wang Lu curiously repeated, because in his impression, Aya was a person who would never compromise in the name of a deal. Aya said, "I took back this body, and from then on, I laid the foundation of his rule." Laid the foundation of his rule? A flash of inspiration flashed through Wang Lu's mind. He incredulously asked, "You left the Caliban sword to him?" Aya smiled. Interestingly, he actually managed to pick up the sword in the stone. Then, her smile turned a bit bitter. "Perhaps in the Caliban sword's view, he is more suitable to be the king of Bretonia." Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was surprised. "That gene that I saw in Golden Flash Town that day, could it be?" Aya nodded. "It's Bedivere's incarnation. He's a high-order profession, so it's not difficult for him to transform his body. Moreover, he has the most professional makeup artist around him, so the acting is almost flawless." Remembering that day when his eyes repeatedly lingered on the other party's chest, Wang Lu only felt that his vision was blurred for a moment. After a long time, Wang Lu finally recovered. "What about you? As a knight, are you really going to hand over your sword to others?" Aya said, "The Caliban sword is no longer my sword. I have found a more suitable sword." With that, she slowly stood up, pulled Wang Lu's hand, and then, before he could react, gently hugged him. "I've already found my Excalibur." Epilogue, eat as much as you can. Being hugged by Aya, Wang Lu was stiff for a quarter of an hour. It was not until Aya let go of him with a blushing face that Wang Lu shook his head, opened his mouth, and then froze for a long time before he said, "The feeling of my chest is really different from before." The cold breath made Wang Lu feel a great danger. Therefore, he changed the subject. "Joan of Arc, you look different from your spirit of the brave." Aya said, "When I pulled out the Caliban sword, I got the blessing of the Dragon Clan. Since then, I will not age, nor grow up. But at that time, I was only 14 years old. When I turned into a spirit of the brave, my body no longer enjoyed the power of blessing. During the time when I was out, I gained some growth, and that's how I am now." Wang Lu sighed with emotion. "In other words, your original body is not a congenital disability? It's just a lack of growth? You really can't judge a book by its cover." Aya suddenly felt a trace of remorse for her behavior of throwing away the Caliban sword. "In short, are you going to repent, make up your mind to abandon your fantasy, and become a hands-off shopkeeper?" "Hands-off shopkeeper?" Aya faintly smiled. "These days, I've been to a lot of places in Bretonia and met a lot of people. In a village, I saw a little boy and a little girl. The two of them are childhood sweethearts. However, the boy is a descendant of a knight, while the little girl is an orphan who grew up in the church. After the withdrawal of Holy Light religion, the two of them experienced an earth-shattering impact. The little girl almost faced a disaster. But at this moment, the boy, who has always been regarded as a promising future, insisted on standing in front of the little girl, not hesitating to shelter her from the wind and rain. The little girl asked him why, and he said that he is a knight, and his dream is to become the Night King. Although this dream is really very immature, seeing him, I realized that the true spirit of chivalry will never die." Wang Lu smiled and asked, "Perhaps that child is just a few examples." Aya pointed to herself. "Few examples? Am I not one of them? When the country was torn apart, I, who was willing to stand up, was just a few examples." After a pause, Aya seriously said, "Moreover, I don't think I really left Bretonia. No matter when I close my eyes, I seem to be able to hear the call of the people in Bretonia." Wang Lu imagined it for a moment and felt that it was quite creepy. Because how many couples would suddenly call out his name when they were having sex? Wouldn't that be terrible? However, since Aya was enjoying it, he just let her be. In short, no matter what she thought, her willingness to go back was more important than anything else. In Bretonia, I have done everything that I can do. However, in 9 regions, there are still some things that I haven't finished yet. I thought that I would never have the chance to set foot on the land of 9 regions again, but Aya said with some sadness and some nostalgia, after boarding this ship, I feel like I'm going home. However, after saying this, Aya cheered up. Since I'm going back to 9 regions, then I'll resume my old business. What? Wang Lu was surprised. Did this child really want to retaliate against the society after losing the throne? Aya said, when I returned to Bretonia this time, I seriously consulted several court chefs and improved my skills, so you can rest assured. It's because you're the court chefs of Bretonia that I'm not at ease. However, in the face of Aya's painstaking work, did Wang Lu have any other choice? Aya confidently smiled as she left the bedroom. After a while, she brought out a meticulously prepared dish. This time, Aya's culinary skills seemed to have improved. On the plate, there was a roasted chicken with golden yellow skin, exuding the fragrance of meat and wine. Wine roasted chicken, do you want to try it? Wang Lu tried a piece and felt that it was fragrant and smooth, which was actually a rare delicacy. Of course, there was still a gap compared to the real court chefs, but compared with her previous dark cuisine, it was really like heaven and earth. It must be said that the taste of this wine-roasted chicken seemed to be a bit wrong. Really? Aya was somewhat surprised as she tasted a piece. It's true, it's not the same as the one I used when I was practicing. It's strange, I'm still using the top-grade mead you brought, the quality should be better than the one I used before. Wang Lu only felt an explosion in his mind. What kind of wine did you say? It's the mead you brought. How did the wine end up in your hands? Wang Lu quickly went to the door and searched for the bag he threw at the door. Sure enough, the mead inside was gone. In order to ensure the effectiveness of the fortified mead, once it was fortified, it could not be casually put back into the mustard seed bag. Therefore, unexpectedly, it was taken away by Aya. You didn't put it in the mustard seed bag. I saw the bottle cap was open, so I smelled it and found that it could still be used. Speaking to this, Aya was somewhat worried. Could it be that it can't be used? Wang Lu took a deep breath, calmed his mood, and then revealed a smile. There's nothing that can't be used. I just want to say, let's finish this roasted chicken. Chapter 365. The long sea journey was like a boundless dream. When he woke up, the silhouette of the 9 regions was already in sight. Standing on the side of the ship, Wang Lu felt that the half a month of crossing the endless sea seemed long, but it seemed to pass in the blink of an eye, which made his heart somewhat reluctant. Of course, if he really had to drift on the sea for another half a month, that would be unbearable. The condition of the ship was impeccable. It had the best hull design, the most exquisite decoration, the cabin was filled with Western continent luxury goods, more than 20 charming and affectionate maids, and the rest of the gold, silver, and jewelry. Such extravagant treatment could not be enjoyed by the king of a country in the Western continent. Wang Lu really enjoyed the treatment of a hero in the eastern city-states. It was unbearable. The food on the ship was too miserable, and no matter how he thought about it, this was a Western continent monster. It was not the ghost chef Aya's fault. She confidently said that she would cook during the voyage. However, after the first day's roast chicken, Aya had no other dishes. In fact, she only learned that one dish, and after the mead was used up, she couldn't make a second roast chicken. It was purely because after Aya succeeded in making roast chicken, she thought that she had comprehended the essence of cooking, and that she was overconfident. However, when Wang Lu didn't check, the next day, he saw the look up at the starry sky improved too, and other unknown substances, which was simply an eye-opener. Wang Lu repeatedly praised that Aya should not be a knight, but a national alchemist. If she was given a kitchen and enough ingredients, sooner or later, she would be able to synthesize the philosopher's stone. In this regard, Aya was deeply frustrated, but how could she be dispirited by this little setback? On the contrary, she was inspired and courageously moved forward. For Wang Lu, on the third day, the situation became more and more serious. After several failed attempts, Aya simply began to use trial and error to find the feeling of cooking. After wasting half of the stored ingredients in the cabin, her alchemy improved once again, and she was only a few steps away from mastering the human body. Unable to bear it any longer, Wang Lu used his chopsticks to draw a 3-inch sword defense, isolating the dozens of unknown substances that Aya served, and angrily rebuked, "Aya, if you have the ability, have a taste and see what the hell is this? Your ingredients are not precise, your seasoning is immoral, your control of the fire is not good, and you have no strength in turning the ladle. If you don't have any skills, do you think you're worthy of wasting the best ingredients on the ship? You must be daydreaming." Aya was indifferent and did not speak, but the determination in her eyes did not retreat. Therefore, Wang Lu's tragedy could only continue. It stood to reason that in this kind of situation, the worst that could happen was to replace someone else. The 20 maids on the ship were not only charming and affectionate, but also good at cooking. Any one of them, even if they closed their eyes to cook, would be 10,000 times more reliable than Aya. However, Wang Lu could not be replaced. Because Aya's return to 9 regions was basically proposed by him. And for Aya, she gave up her Night King identity and the sword in the stone to accompany Wang Lu back. For a woman to do this for you, what was the big deal about eating a few of her great sage stones? Fortunately, Wang Lu finally found a way to survive. Because even if Aya had 1,000 faults, at least there was one thing that was reliable: her knife skill was absolutely at the Grandmaster level. Of course, this was also nonsense. How could a legendary level swordsman's skill in wielding a knife and wielding a spear be bad? Therefore, Wang Lu simply changed the recipe to sashimi feast. In addition to all kinds of fresh fish sashimi, other ingredients on the ship could also be made into sashimi, such as ham sashimi, sausage sashimi, pumpkin sashimi, broccoli sashimi, and bread sashimi, which gave Wang Lu a way to survive. However, the days of eating sashimi every day were really bitter for Wang Lu, so when he saw the land, the silhouette of 9 regions was like a pot of fragrant streaky pork. Even if there was a small problem with the route, which deviated from the proper direction and didn't see the harbor, Wang Lu was still full of joy. In any case, for someone like him who was close to King Pill, it was not so important whether there was a harbor or not. As the ship continued to approach, Wang Lu seemed to smell the aroma of meat. Moreover, it was roasted dog meat with just the right amount of heat. A moment later, Wang Lu, who was standing on the side of the ship, was taken aback. Because he had already seen that on the beach, there was a plainly dressed woman who was boldly fiddling with a pot. Inside the pot, large pieces of meat were bubbling with a tempting aroma. It was a pot of braised dog meat. And that woman was impressively Zen Master Guru, Shao Qi. Although he whispered to himself, Shao Qi, who was several miles away, looked up and smiled at him. "I've been waiting for you for a long time. You're finally here." With that, her figure moved, and together with the pot, she boarded the ship. Her speed was so fast that it made people click their tongues. "Although you're not early, you've come at the right time. I've been waiting for you on this beach for half a month. I just caught a black dog and cooked it, and then you came. Since you're here, let's eat together. After eating, we'll go back together. Your master is going crazy waiting for you." As Shao Qi spoke, she put the pot on the deck. Behind her, her hand took out a pile of bowls, plates, and chopsticks from her mustard seed bag. Other than giving a set to Wang Lu, she also handed them to Aya, who was standing silently behind Wang Lu. "Aya? I've heard of you for a long time. This is the first time we've met. Do you want to try my cooking?" Aya was stunned for a moment. She frowned and actually waved her hand to refuse. With Aya's temperament, she rarely behaved noble and elegant. In Wang Lu's view, this refusal was purely because they were in the same trade. Compared to her alchemical products, this pot of dog meat was enough to subvert her worldview and explode her obviously distorted cognitive world. Shaoqi didn't care. He picked up his own bowl and chopsticks and began to eat the meat. While eating, he said to Wang Lu, "In view of the fact that the two of us snatched the food a bit fast, I'll make it short. Previously in the Western continent, you asked for an indefinite length of marriage leave. Your sex elders sympathized with your hard work in the Western continent, so they allowed it. However, as you can guess, after this trip to the Western continent, things will pile up like a mountain. Moreover, your role in the Western continent is by no means dispensable. Therefore, there are a lot of things that you need to participate in. If you drag it for 10 days or half a month, that's fine. But if you drag it for a month, the people in 9 regions will inevitably become impatient. Right now, there are a lot of people waiting for you at the place where your ship may dock. You're lucky to meet me, so we can eat a pot of dog meat." Shaoqi said, put away the pot that he and Wang Lu had already divided, stood up and said, "Then let's get ready to go. I'm afraid it's about time." Wang Lu curiously asked, "What about time? Moreover, what about my ship?" "Don't worry, you won't be lost. Later, the Wanxian League will send someone to help you put it away. In short, you just need to come with me." While speaking, Shaoqi has already buckled Wang Lu's wrist. However, at the same time, her wrist was also buckled by Aya. Seeing Aya's serious face, Wang Lu was afraid that she misunderstood something, so he explained, "This is my master's friend. I don't have an affair with her." Inwardly, she thought, even if I have an affair with Shaoqi, you don't have to watch over me like this, right? Aren't you, this ghost chef, a bit too broad? However, Aya ignored him. Her eyes kept wandering around Shaoqi's body, and she became more and more suspicious. "You. Could it be that you are?" Before she could finish, Shaoqi has already said, "This poor monk is dog meat. This is the first time we meet. See you later." With that, her figure moved and disappeared without a trace, bringing Wang Lu along with her. Aya was slightly stunned. Although with her strength, she could completely stop them, she didn't do so. After a while, Aya couldn't help but laugh. "So that's how it is, it's you." At the same time, Wang Lu only felt a blur in front of him. He didn't know how far he had been dragged by Zen Master Guru to a noisy place. When he looked around, he was immediately surprised. What is this place? Why are there so many people? A large number of people wasn't scary. What was scary was that almost all of them were famous people, not common people. The great elder of Kunlun sect, the 10,000 Arts sect's abbot, the Xingjing sect's inspector. Any one of them had a resounding reputation, similar to the Spirit Sword sect's Heavenly Sword Hall elder. And at this time, Wang Lu could see hundreds of them. So many people, at this time, gathered on a wide grassland, which seemed to be crowded. And in the sky, there were 5 floating golden platforms, looking down from above, majestic. After observing for a while, Wang Lu finally remembered this place and, incidentally, cleared up everything. Southern Heaven region? The group of immortal tombs? Are they going to King open the immortal tombs? The opening ceremony is being held? That's why this place is a gathering of heroes? And then I, as the biggest hero of the Western expedition, should speak on the stage? People can't find me, but they can't just postpone the opening ceremony because of a disciple who hasn't reached the level of King Pill. So many people are very anxious, right? Shaoqi clapped his hands from the side and said with a smile, "Being with you saves me the effort to explain. Now that you know, then you." Before his voice fell, an elder suddenly appeared in front of Wang Lu and grabbed his hand. "It's finally here. If not, your speech would have been taken by Xingjing sect's disciple." Wang Lu was in a trance that he didn't even see the elder's face before he was grabbed by him. Fortunately, from the voice, he could still recognize that it was his third uncle, Fang He. Being grabbed by Fang He, Wang Lu's vision blurred, and then he was already in midair. Clouds and mist curled up under his feet, and before his eyes, the bright golden platform had been transferred to the golden platform in the sky. There were still a lot of people on the golden platform, and their weight was obviously higher than that of the elders below the platform. Wang Lu's eyes swept across them, and his breathing paused for a moment. The leaders of the 5 super sects of the Wanxian League were all here. The leader of Lingjian School, Feng Yin, Xingjing Sects He Tu, 10,000 Art Sects Tian Luan, Kunlun Sects Juri, and Royal Soldier Sects War God Kuchin. Among them, Kuchin of Royal Soldier Sect was the most unfamiliar. He wore heavy armor and an airtight mask, which didn't reveal his true face. In fact, even his portrait was covered in a mask, which made him look very mysterious. In fact, since the fall of the previous leader of Royal Soldier Sect, unparalleled god of war, this sect, which was scolded as a mad dog by many people, had been low-key for decades. Probably only the opening of the group of immortal tombs could lead them to appear. When Wang Lu observed the crowd, he also became the focus of everyone's attention. What he did in the Western continent was known by all the high-level people present. Toward this mysterious lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect, several Supremes of Unity Stage cast their attention on him. The invisible pressure brought by these invisible eyes was enough to shock the ordinary Daoist Master King Pill. However, Wang Lu didn't seem to be aware of it. Because beside Wang Lu, the woman in white with a ponytail pressed her hand on the emerald green bamboo sword at her waist, sheltering her disciple from the wind and rain. At the same time, the voice of Feng Yin Daoist Master sounded, "Okay, our lead disciple Wang Lu has arrived in time. Should the agenda be restored to the original and Wang Lu will make the third speech?" As he spoke, his eyes looked directly at the Daoist in the middle of the golden platform, which was also the most important person here, Supreme He Tuesday. He too was silent for a moment, nodded his head, and then waved his hand toward the side of the golden platform. A woman who had been sitting cross-legged stood up and respectfully retreated. That woman was a disciple of Xingjing Sect and the original speaker to replace Wang Lu. Although no one knew what she did in the Western continent, for her to be qualified to replace Wang Lu's speech, it was obvious that she also had amazing achievements. Unfortunately, her shining opportunity was robbed by Wang Lu, just like a bride who was humiliated and miserable. However, the woman's eyebrows were indifferent. When she got up, she looked back and smiled, like a spring breeze. "That's Qianghua," Wang Wu timely introduced, the lead disciple of Xingjing Sect. Chapter 366. Qianghua. Upon hearing this name, Wang Lu felt like it was like a thunderclap reverberating in his ears. In 9 regions, there might be people who didn't know about Lingjian School, but there were not many people who didn't know about Qianghua. As the lead disciple of Xingjing Sect, Qianghua had been dazzling ever since her debut. Everyone's eyes were focused on her. Not only because she was the last disciple of Hichu Daoren, but also a strong competitor for the next sect leader of Xingjing Sect, but also because she was as beautiful as a fairy, devastatingly beautiful. In any place, beautiful women were more likely to catch people's eyes, not to mention a beautiful woman with a promising future and superb immortal method. Originally, Lu Li and Zhu Shiyao from Lingjian School and Zhou Mumu from Kunlun Sect all had similar characteristics. However, compared to Qianghua, each of them had their own defects. Zhu Shiyao was unreasonable, losing her indifference. Lu Li was naive, losing her childishness. Zhou Mumu was outspoken, losing her impatience. Each of them had their own defects. Qianghua, on the other hand, was mellow and free, perfect and flawless. In any point, she was not the most outstanding. She never had the amazing record of killing the 12 blood cloud demons when she was still in the foundation establishment stage like Lu Li. Like Wang Lu, who repeatedly fought against the senior cultivators, cleverly used all the resources, and regarded the stage gap as nothing, she also never created a miracle. Zhu Shiyao was known to be invincible in the same stage, so she didn't dare to say that she could win. However, step by step, after nearly 20 years of cultivation, she had steadily stood on the stage of Daoist Master of King Pill. Yes, Qianghua was already a Daoist master of King Pill, which Wang Lu realized the moment he locked eyes with her. The threshold between the King Pill and the non-King Pill could be deep or shallow. For many mediocre people, achieving the King Pill was nothing more than advancing one level of magical power, nothing to worry about. However, for a few people, the stage before and after King Pill was completely different, and the gap between people before and after this threshold was even greater. When Wang Lu was in the Grand Cloud Mountain, he dared to take one or two moves from Tiger King of Yuanying stage. However, even if he had the strength of peak Shudan stage, he didn't dare to say that his non-phase sword defense would be foolproof in front of Qianghua. For Qianghua to achieve the King Pill in 20 years, he didn't dare to say that it was unprecedented, but the speed was still amazingly fast. What was more frightening was that her foundation was solid. Once she succeeded in the King Pill, she would be reborn. In the past, people estimated that Qianghua's added value according to Wang Lu's method of adding value was about 14 or 15, which was close to Luli. However, now, Luli, who hadn't passed the King Pill test, no longer had the qualification to compete with her. In addition, what Wang Lu cared about the most was that pair of eyes that seemed to be able to speak. At her master's request, Qianghua got up and left. Her eyes only met with Wang Lu's for a moment, but Wang Lu seemed to hear Qianghua's gentle voice in his ear. "I've long heard of your reputation. Today, I finally know that your reputation is not in vain. I'm looking forward to your report." Her courteous attitude greatly changed Wang Lu's impression of Qianghua. Before this, he had never met Qianghua, but he had long heard of her reputation. People said that she was modest and courteous, gentle and elegant, like a flower on a high mountain. However, according to the news and public opinion, especially the usual practice of Xingjing sect, Wang Lu automatically analyzed her as being pretentious and sanctimonious. However, at this time, he found out that his previous thinking was biased. Qianghua, this person, seemed to have her own way of doing things. She was not the exquisite packaging product of Xingjing sect's huge propaganda organization. However, Wang Lu didn't have the time to consider Qianghua. At this time, on the golden platform, the sect leaders had taken their seats one by one. He Tu, Zhuri, Tianluan, Kuqin, and Feng Yin were all sitting on the golden platform in the middle. On both sides were the leaders of Wanxiang, Flowing Cloud, and other top-rank sections. As for the lead disciples of the sects like Zhan Zai and Zhou Mumu, they usually only had to wait behind their sect's elders and had no qualification to sit. However, under the guidance of his uncle Fang He and Master Wang Wu, Wang Lu took his seat on the left side of the golden platform. According to the order, it was actually second only to the sect leaders of the 5 uniques. As Wang Lu sat down, his master quietly explained everything to him from behind. That day, after the sect leader got the key from Wang Lu, he immediately returned to 9 regions. After that, the excavation management and the Wanxian League conducted a comprehensive inspection of the key to ensure that nothing went wrong, and on the other hand, they prepared for today's ceremony. For this group of immortal tombs, the excavation management and even the entire Wanxian League worked hard for several years without any results. Now that they finally saw the dawn of victory, they were overjoyed. The scale of the ceremony was comparable to the Wanxian League's 10,000 Immortals meeting, which was held once in decades. There were 3 main items on the agenda of the ceremony. The first was the speech by the leader of the Wanxian League, Supreme He Tu, followed by the speech by the director of the excavation management, Feng Yin. Considering the identity of these 2 people, their speech was an essential procedure. The third item was more surprising. The Wanxian League actually arranged for Wang Lu to give a speech as the recipient of the Outstanding Contribution Award. Actually, there's nothing surprising about it. Wang Wu, who was standing behind her disciple, said rather mockingly, "Think about it carefully. What have these people from the Wanxian League and the excavation management done in the past few months? They spend a huge amount of money to cross the ocean, not for trade nor for colonization, but for the key to the group of immortal tombs. However, in addition to killing the local natives in the Western continent, causing both sides to suffer, have they ever achieved any practical and effective results? You saw Golden King, and you took the key. From the beginning to the end, it has nothing to do with them. If you didn't stay in the Western continent for another month, giving the Wanxian League and the excavation management more or less time to paint their faces, this whole action would simply be a farce. This opening ceremony should summarize the achievements of the past few months and even the past few years, but without you, what else could they summarize? To summarize how bloated and incompetent their own bureaucracy is? Ha ha ha, if that's the case, then it's true that they can't do without me. But, this is strange. Since my importance is so irreplaceable, what kind of ability does Cheonghua have that she could be my substitute and sit here? Her. Apart from you, she is the biggest contributor to the excavation management's Western expedition. Do you remember the situation that I told you before? When sect leader Senior Brother went to the Knowledge City alone to look for clues about the key to the group of immortal tombs, it was not only to get rid of Tianyu, but also because Senior Brother really needed strong evidence to prove that the key to the group of immortal tombs is in the king's treasure house. As the person in charge of the excavation management, he was actually suffering from the bloated bureaucracy, so he could not act arbitrarily like you. Any decision must have sufficient basis. Even if on the second day after he set foot in the Western continent, he already had 60 to 70% certainty that the key was in the treasure house, he still had to look for clues. However, with his IQ and foreign language ability, in an environment where there was no language barrier, looking for clues in thousands of libraries was more difficult than looking for a wife. At that time, it was Cheonghua who helped him that he was finally able to synthesize the clues from thousands of documents. Wang Lu said in surprise, Cheonghua. Yes, it's Cheonghua. She went alone and entered the Knowledge City earlier than anyone else to start the investigation. In addition to locating the key to the group of immortal tombs, she also helped to sort out the information of the several holy ones of Holy Light religion, analyzing their weaknesses from countless clues. Mad Dog Tianyu and sect leader Senior Brother were able to suppress the legendary holy ones of Holy Light religion, and the information that Cheonghua sorted out is indispensable. Wang Lu sighed with emotion. Unexpectedly, she's actually an academic talent. You really can't judge a book by its cover. I thought that she, that kind of high mountain flower, was most suitable to play the role of asterisk or something like that. Well, let's put aside Cheonghua's problem for the time being. The point is, you arranged me to speak without my consent, but I haven't. Before he could finish his words, Wang Wu handed him a thick draft of the speech. You don't need to prepare it. Just read it according to this, don't miss a single word. Wang Wu lightly said, don't worry, this is the result of 3 days and 3 nights of painstaking effort by the drafting team set up by the excavation management. Before transcribing it, they also specially proofread it 3 times, ensuring that every word is carefully chosen, every word is a gem. The more Wang Lu listened, the more mysterious he felt. However, before he could open it to take a closer look, a soft but irresistible force spread out not far from him. Like a spring breeze, it powerfully attracted his attention from the draft in his hand. Fellow Taoists, the opening ceremony of the group of immortal tombs officially begins now. The one who spoke was Feng Yin Taoist master, who was on the left side of the golden platform, who was also the host of the ceremony. The voice of the sect leader of Lingjian school was neither fast nor slow, flat and light. However, the moment he opened his mouth, the slightly noisy grassland suddenly became silent. Everyone restrained their voice and focused on one thing. Thousands of pairs of eyes gathered on the golden platform, waiting for Feng Yin Taoist master's next words with a pious posture. Of course, behind this pious posture, no one knew how many people secretly cursed the despicable and shameless bureaucrats of the Wanxian League. This kind of attention-grabbing spell, which forced people to listen carefully, was the product of thousands of years of bureaucratic culture of the Wanxian League. Its origin was no longer reliable, and for thousands of years, people gnashed their teeth in hatred. However, it was still tenacious. Whenever an important leader gave a speech, this spell would be used, which forced the people below to not even be able to doze off. Fortunately, Feng Yin Daoist master's opening remarks were very short. After 2 or 3 sentences, he entered the first agenda item. Next, the Wanxian League's leader, Hichu Daoran, will give a speech. During the short period of time, the spell was lifted. Wang Lu didn't want to waste time, so he lowered his head to look at the draft. At first glance, he couldn't wait to slap the table and stand up. Because at first glance, Wang Lu saw that the title of his speech was actually, Report on the Task of Searching for Things in the Western Continent. The first sentence under the title was, in order to thoroughly implement the spirit of the 107th General Assembly of the Wanxian League, earnestly do a good job in the excavation management of the group of immortal tombs, and earnestly look for the key to open the group of immortal tombs. Our team is closely united around the Excavation Management Committee with Feng Yin Daoist Master as the core. We firmly grasp the key points of the work determined in the first working meeting of the Excavation Management Committee, and earnestly carry out the work. Now the relevant situation is reported as follows. First, careful preparation and thorough deployment. What the F***ck is this? Wang Lu couldn't wait to burn the book on the spot. Unfortunately, just as he was about to flip out, Hichu Daoran opened his mouth. Filled with anger, he could only endure it. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.